Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, plants and animals and machines alike, thank you for joining us today. This is the second installment of Matt the Back Lovato and Keith the Bone Cutrone for the Back and Bone Show. Today, we are going to get pretty deep into some mixed martial arts talk. A lot of our perspectives on what's going on in the world right now with that, and we get into a lot of fitness information, not just fitness physically, but philosophically, ways to look at what you're doing as you're training and developing your body. Supplements, or rather the myth of supplements, performance-enhancing drugs and all that, and what the competition world is really like. But that's going to be about the first hour, so if that's not really your thing, go ahead and skip ahead, because we make a note of it on about an hour in. We shift gears, and we're going to get into some more media topics, talking about some horror movies. We got a whole stint on John Carpenter, which, you know, if you're listening to us and you're still listening, you probably share the same view on John Carpenter we do. He's one of the greats. As we go, we're going to get into what we expect from the horror movie world, and a little bit of current events on the Marvel comic book universe when we get to about the end there. So if you guys are curious what's going on in Iron Man's world, which I know I am, stay tuned. Also, a big note that I'd like to make is that Matt and I are not experts in every topic we talk about. We are just a couple dudes who are giving our analytical rundown of what we have an interest in. So if you hear some stuff in here that you disagree with, or you know otherwise, give us a comment. Let us know what you're picking up on. We want to hear what we're doing wrong. We want to hear what you guys have to say about us. Like these two stupid fucking white guys. What the fuck is their problem? What do they think you're talking about? Telling me what's happening in the Marvel comic universe. No, I'm not telling you. I'm telling you what I read, and I want to hear what you read. So let's all meet in the middle. Let's be friends. And once again, welcome to the show.
Turns all your bad feelings into good feelings. It's a nightmare.
Whatever you're reaching for better be a sandwich, because you're gonna have to eat it.
An Uzi? I'm not from South Central Los fucking Angeles. I didn't come here to shoot 20 black 10-year-olds in a fucking drive-by. I want a normal gun for a normal person.
He thought he was white before? He's a sweet-ass sucking man.
I'll use small words that you'll be sure to understand.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for the second edition of Back and Bone, which is going to be our working title we're going with today.
Back and Bone, Part 2, Back in Action.
Bone in action. Anyway, so it's been a couple weeks since we last got together. It was a minimal but pleasant success. Everyone who listened to it gave us some good feedback. Thanks for joining us again today.
Critics were raving that Matt and Keith's podcast, Volume 1, was heartfelt, touching. 5 out of 5 stars.
Right.
It's in the early running for, if they had Oscar awards for podcasts, it would certainly be the top contender.
It's the Oscasts.
We're the Daniel Day-Lewis of podcasts.
We together make one Daniel Day-Lewis.
one perfect specimen.
So here's a thing. I noticed you got some fight news and stuff up. You're an MMA junkie on your. This happened a while ago, and I never saw it until the other night. Did you Do you happen to catch Dave Bautista's MMA fight when he had that?
Yeah, he fought that big old
I'm
fat
pretty sure
dude.
he fought Scott Coker. That was what that was my immediate thought.
For those of you who don't know, Scott Coker is the former CEO of Strikeforce, current CEO of Bellator.
And he is like, I want to say he's 5'2", 340 pounds. Like,
yeah, the guy that Dave Bautista fought, and I'll look this up right now. I can't remember the dude's name.
I have it written down somewhere. Are you sitting on my notes by chance?
Might be.
No, I thought I said him there. Make sure you get your spot back. We don't want to get any distortion on the mic.
The guy that Dave Bautista fought is just a Vince Lucero.
Vince Lucero, yeah.
Yes, he doesn't. Vince Lucero does not have a Wikipedia page, so I'm assuming he's not a very highly touted opponent.
Well, they did say that he had something like 40 plus professional fights. I don't know that that's true. By looking at him, I would say no. But
Now,
you know what?
was that the official or the unofficial record? Was that the
That was what Joe-
was that the Hickson
yeah.
Gracie 500-0 record?
No.
Or was that the
That's what Joe Lozon was saying when he was doing fucking commentary, which was pretty funny.
Wait, Joe? They had Joe Lozon
Yeah, Joe
on
Lozon
commentary?
was the guy. Well, he wasn't on commentary. He was the interviewer.
Oh, okay.
So what I thought was really interesting about that is like Dave Bautista has been training mixed martial arts for a while. He's a very athletic guy. He's a very big, powerful monster of a human being. And this blob of a man almost took him out. Like
he did.
he was throwing short shots. He was weighing down on him in the cage, and he was even taunting him at one point. And it was real funny.
All right, but Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista's martial arts background, I don't know how legit that is. It's kind of like, like CM Punk, like supposedly having a fucking karate background or jiu-jitsu background or whatever. I kind of feel like Dave Bautista falls into the same category as that. I've been following, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I've been following it for a long time. And the only video evidence I saw of Dave Bautista practicing any martial arts prior to his fight with Vince Lucero was him doing some like what's the Filipino stick fighting?
Kali.
Him practicing Kali, because Dave Bautista is actually Filipino, which is I find pretty
He's
fascinating
the
in itself.
biggest Filipino
He's
man
the
I've
most
ever seen in my
massive
entire life.
Filipino I've ever seen. So I'm on SureDog, and I just pulled up Vince Lucero's record. He's 6'2", 300 pounds, age 46.
By the way, I just want to point out that Vince Lucero was not held accountable to make weight for the heavyweight cap.
No,
he weighed in at 300, and they were just fucking cool with it.
Yeah, this was he's a super heavyweight.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, anybody who's a super heavyweight, most of the time, this isn't always the case, but most of the time, they're just too lazy to like make the 265 pound limit. Don't get me wrong, there are some legitimate super heavyweights out there, like a Bob Sapp or somebody like that, who's just really that big of a dude. Most of them are just really big fat guys, and that's why you don't see a super heavyweight division in the UFC. These dudes would gas out in 2 minutes.
There just isn't enough justifiable competition in that.
Yeah, there's not. It's kind of like the same reason it's really hard to find, like if they had a 115 pound division. It's hard to find really, really small guys, but it's also hard to find really, really big guys. And we just pulled up a picture of Vince Lucero, and yeah, Keith is right. Absolutely. This guy is Scott Coker's doppelganger. He looks just like him. And on top of that, he has a record of a whopping 22 wins and 25 losses.
Which
now,
I would say, as an experienced fighter with a good background in competition overall with wrestling and everything, a record like that is what I like to call an ugly record.
It's an ugly record,
You don't want to fight someone with an ugly record.
Now, he does have some dudes who... he's got some big names that
I saw Roy Nelson on there.
He's got some big names that he's lost to. There's Soa Palele, Roy Nelson, Brad Imes,
LeVar Johnson.
LeVar Johnson, yeah.
Tim Sylvia.
Tim Sylvia, wow. Eddie Sanchez,
Ron Sparks,
Tim Hague. Tim Hague, he's the one. He died.
Yeah, Tim Hague died. He's the one who Todd Duffy got his he cut his teeth on that fight with the fast knockout, the jab.
Yeah,
over Tim Hague.
yeah, that was his highlight reel
Yeah.
one. Yeah, Tim Hague. That's a really sad story. Actually, he died. He had a boxing match, and I think it was in a different country. I think, but he had a boxing match, and then he got knocked out. I think he got. I don't remember it being like a brutal KO. I think he got TKO'd in the fight, and then he ended up dying like a couple days later, or a day later, or something like that. Really
I vaguely
sad.
remember that story. I knew he was dead. The details surrounding it kind of eluded me.
Yeah. Well, in any case, Dave Bautista looked like shit in his mixed martial arts debut.
His takedown that he got him was actually pretty clean. Not that there was anything really stopping it from being a perfectly clean takedown. Like there was
no resistance.
But I want to give
takedown.
him. It was like if you see someone drilling an outside single, and he just did this like beautiful, perfect like inline shot to an outside single, and then just took him down. It was like that was real clean, Batista. He was feeding that to you.
This was very much Dave Bautista's. I don't think Dave Bautista seems like a pretty self-aware dude, and I've seen interviews with him before where they've asked him, would you ever fight Brock Lesnar? And from what I remember, he was pretty honest. He was like, well, yeah, of course I would to get the payday, but I think he was very self-aware. Like he didn't necessarily give himself a chance. He knows better.
He was pretty cool in his interview after this fight. I remember him being very just like you said, self-aware is a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
he was like. He was like, "Oh man, I let the nerves get to me. This is really intense. I don't think I." He's like, "I was ready for it. The training camp was good. I just got really nervous when I got in here."
I think for him it was more or less like kind of a bucket list type thing.
Yeah,
and it's like really at the end of the day, for somebody like Bautista, he's got nothing to gain in that.
Right.
I mean, like, look, if Dave Bautista decided. He could have easily went the CM Punk route and just got a big fight in UFC and probably made millions of dollars, and he would have at least gotten something out of it. Granted, he probably would have lost that fight because you take any heavyweight in the UFC and they're going to beat him. But at the same time, at least he's getting a big payday.
Right.
With this, he couldn't have made much money off that fight because this was a tiny fight against Vince Lucero.
Yeah, it was a nothing.
I mean, and it's.
I guess he was supposed to fight somebody else. I don't remember who it was. He was supposed to fight, and they fell out.
Well, and in that regard, it's just about it's as ballsy of a thing as you can imagine because there's nothing for him to gain in that. I mean, if he loses,
no, definitely no disrespect to Batista for taking that. I appreciate that a lot. And in a stage like that, that's where those circus fights belong. Like a professional wrestler stepping in, and,
I'm really actually, usually I'm all for the entertainment aspect of MMA, and I do think that having guys like Conor come in and do these kind of with these outlandish personalities and really allowing them to be themselves, I actually think that's what helps to elevate the sport in the sense that people pay from the beginning of fighting. People pay to see outlandish personalities.
Right.
You look at the most famous fighters ever: Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather. They're bigger than life personalities. That's what people want to see. So I do think that those guys help to elevate the sport, but at the same time, there's a time and a place for it. And the guys have to be able to fight too.
There's also, I was just gonna say, there's a big difference between those guys and the characters that are just loud. There's a big difference between those guys. Like there are people, no matter where you go, that are good at talking shit.
Right.
There's gonna be people everywhere you go that can exude their character and throw that shit in your face. But the difference between them and all those guys you just listed is, when it comes down to it, they pretty much have fucked up everyone they fought.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, people like to, people have this tendency to think that, McGregor had the easy route and this and that, and he talked his way to the top. And it's like, if you really actually look at it, he kind of didn't at all. I mean, he smashed like some legendary fighters.
He got moved up quickly in an overall timeline, but what he did to every single person he fought was he made them look fucking like jokes.
And now what people like to do when they talk about Conor McGregor is they'll always go, well, what about the Diaz fight? It's like, all right, you have one dude who stylistically is a difficult matchup for the guy. And I'm not
stylistically is a difficult matchup for anyone.
for yeah. Now you got a guy like that, yeah. So stylistically, it's a tough matchup. But other than that, other than the one loss to Diaz, and then he came back and he beat Diaz in the second fight, he TKO'd Eddie Alvarez and made Eddie Alvarez, who's a multiple-time world champion, has been world-class for the last 10 years, made him look like he didn't even belong in the... Nobody has done that to Eddie Alvarez. He made him look
like a first-timer.
Right.
He looked like... Eddie Alvarez had this look of defeat in his face.
Absolutely.
Like halfway through that fight where he was just like, what the fuck am I even doing here?
Absolutely. You got Jose Aldo. 13 seconds. I mean, that was an absolutely...
Starched him.
Yeah, even after that, look, you had... Now, after that, Aldo came back and he lost to Max Holloway a couple times, but it took some time for Max Holloway to pick him apart. And, granted, Max Holloway's got a different style, but nonetheless, nobody has done that to Aldo the way that Conor did. Before that, he had a tough fight against Mendez, but hey, it was short.
Fucking starched Mendez too when it came down to
Mendez,
it.
It's not an easy fight. Before that, Dennis Seaver, yeah. Before that,
Dennis Seaver isn't like a big... Dennis Seaver isn't like a big draw, but that's a respectable
But he's a
win.
solid fight.
Yeah, that's definitely not a gimme fight.
Right.
It's not an easy win, and Dennis Seaver's a dangerous striker.
No, absolutely not. And then prior to that, you had Dustin Poirier, who's on a hot streak right now. He made Dustin Poirier look silly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he absolutely destroyed Dustin Poirier. Before that, Max Holloway absolutely didn't destroy Max Holloway. I think Conor tore his ACL in that fight.
He did,
beat him.
And he still handily defeated Max Holloway.
Yeah,
I don't think he lost a point in that fight.
No, he didn't. And granted, it was a very young Max Holloway. That was 5 years ago. But still, even if you were just to take that in itself, even if you were just to take Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, Chad Mendez, Jose Aldo, Nate Diaz, Eddie Alvarez, that is a rap sheet of top level fighters that he ran through right there.
And I would like to say, just from a personal experience of viewing Conor McGregor's fights, the first time I saw him fight, what was the guy's name he fought?
Was it
when he first fought in UFC?
Marcus Brimage?
Yeah, Marcus Brimage. So I watched that fight, and I remember seeing it, and I'm like, I think I've heard of this guy before. I think he's pretty good, this Irish dude. But I didn't know because I hadn't followed him really closely. But when I saw his stance, I was like, all right, his stance is a little wide, but his balance is good. And then I started seeing his footwork, and I was like, Jesus Christ, his distancing is crazy. It looked, the way he started landing shots on Marcus Brimage looked almost exactly the way Anderson Silva looked when he was fighting Chris Lieben. It was just everything he threw landed just at the exact right place, just at the exact right distance. He's just throwing punches just about an inch behind the back of his head, and it's...
I think that's what some people who maybe aren't as well informed on fighting, or just they're not able to see those little things. They can't appreciate really how good somebody like McGregor is at keeping his opponents at the end of his punches, and is just like Keith said, his timing and his distance are absolutely perfect. If you were to do a breakdown, I'm assuming, of his accuracy, it's probably through the roof, because that guy there's not a lot of wasted motion in Conor McGregor's punches.
The exact thing I thought when I saw that fight was this guy's gonna be a motherfucker.
He has the ability to take a good fighter and really, really expose their weaknesses. I mean, he's just so good on the feet, and people like to go back to that Mayweather fight now and say, "Ooh, what about his stand up?" And that, well, you're talking about him versus the greatest boxer of all time. The funny thing about that is they're now, I don't know if you've heard about this, but they're doing talks of Mayweather coming over to the UFC, and there's rumors that they were thinking about doing modified rules where no elbows allowed, no knees allowed, all this other bullshit.
We're gonna do modified rules where you can't do anything but punch and dodge punches.
It's ridiculous. And then after that McGregor and Mayweather fight, people there was people on social media who were saying all this shit about Floyd or McGregor's just not on Mayweather's level. Floyd's a GOAT, blah, 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 blah. But it's but you guys are forgetting that this dude went over to this guy's sport and did it. If fucking Mayweather tried to come over to MMA, it wouldn't even, you could take the lowest level 125 pounder from the UFC and destroy Mayweather. It wouldn't even be remotely competitive.
Yeah.
Not even a little bit. He would just get manhandled. And I think, and you know, you have all these people who speculate, and they're like, well, if he took a little time to work on his takedown. No.
No, absolutely
There's not enough time in the world. He's 40 years old. It wouldn't matter if he was 30 years old. There wouldn't be enough time in the world.
No. Like, it's... I've said this forever. I think this is super obvious. I think anyone who doesn't think this, you know, no offense, but you're stupid as shit. It is... They're two different fucking games. They're two different games.
Yeah.
Take a football player and have him go play basketball. He's not going to be as good as the basketball players who've been doing that their whole fucking lives. It doesn't work that way. If I'm really good at baseball and you put a golf club in my hands and tell me to go hit hole-in-ones against fucking Tiger Woods, I'm probably not going to do that well.
Absolutely.
It's a really simple thing, you know, like if I'm practicing my whole life to do one set of skills or a varied set of skills, whatever it is, but whatever my game is that I'm playing, that I've worked on that forever, and you go, that's cool, that reminds me a lot of this one, why don't you go do that against the people who've been doing that forever? Well, I'm probably not going to win, and if I do, it's circumstance. It's all right, that happened that time, but not for any logical reason.
Well, and I think what it is this is a lot of times when you see these opinions of people online and just in general, this is coming from the opinions of people who I would think that it's coming from people who lack the understanding of the time it takes to acquire a skill. And we touched on this a little bit in the last podcast as well, about how, you know, it takes a lifetime, it takes years to be able to become proficient at something.
Well, I don't even like the expression to acquire a skill, because that gives you the impression that you acquire it and then you have it.
Right. Build on a skill, I should say.
It takes time.
Improve on a skill.
Yeah. I mean, you may acquire a skill, but you also have to maintain it.
Right.
It takes a level of maintenance. It also takes you never really master it. There's no such thing as true mastery. You only get better and better and fluctuate from better and worse in your skills.
Right. Yeah, and you know, while we're on the subject of McGregor and that whole, you know, because actually prior to when we did our last podcast, the whole McGregor bus incident hadn't happened yet. You know, where he threw the dolly through the window.
Right.
And all
That happened like the day after.
Yeah, it was like the day after. Bad timing.
Oh, I know. We had a lot to talk about if that was.
But you know, so since then we had the Khabib fight versus Al Iaquinta, who stepped in last minute after they cycled through like 5 opponents or something like that. Which was, you know, it was a pretty one-sided fight. Yeah. Khabib controlled the action. However, all of the other lightweights should really be thanking Iaquinta for that fight, because it really did provide people with a blueprint on how to beat Khabib, even though Khabib won, in my opinion.
You think so? What did you see there?
Number one, he had a lot of tendencies, and I know Joe Rogan got a lot of shit because he said this during the fight, but I 100% agreed. I think he showed a lot of tendencies in his stand-up. He leaves a lot of margin for error, and I think somebody who's as sharp on the feet as Conor could easily catch him on the feet standing. Now, I don't know how much of that is just kind of him knowing he had control of the fight, so he didn't give a shit. Mm-hmm. But he's kind of showed these tendencies over and over again. I think he has a lot of faith in his chin, but I think we've seen what happened when somebody gets too much faith in their chin, and there's always that chance that they could get clipped. And then the other thing that I saw was he was definitely fading out in the last couple rounds. He was taking Iaquinta down with ease in the first 2 to 3 rounds. The last 2 rounds, I don't think he scored any of the takedowns that he attempted. Iaquinta stuffed them all, and then he had to rely on his jab. His gas tank, and I don't know how much of that is just, you know, I've heard before that it's a hard weight cut for him. I don't know how much of it is that, but for me, there was 2 major focal points. It was his gas tank, which clearly I think was affected in the last 2 rounds, and his stand-up wasn't impressive. I mean, it was good enough to get past Iaquinta, and he can get away with that because his wrestling's so good. However, I think if you put him against a more explosive striker, he could get caught.
I think there's a difference between with a fighter like Khabib. I think there's a big difference between his stand-up being unimpressive and his stand-up just being ugly. Because I see ugly striking. I
agree.
I see ugly but still effective striking. I see errors and I see room for improvement, but I also think he's doing shit that works for him.
Yeah, because he still does land.
Yeah,
he still outstruck him.
Did you ever see? You remember Shane Roller?
Was he on The Ultimate Fighter?
No, he was on. He was in WEC and then he moved into UFC.
Oh, Shane Roller, fights. I do remember him.
Terrible, ugly fighter.
And he had a really. Now this is.
He had a beautiful knockout over. I can't remember what his name is. That guy who looked like a little Vitor Belfort. Who was like way pretty striking, super clean movement. See if you can find that real quick.
Now here's
fast, athletic guy, and Shane Roller caught him like with the ugliest looking 1-2 and just knocked his chin off of his head. And that was a good example of ugly but effective striking.
Now here's how you guys know that I am a personal trainer. It was that when I thought of Shane Roller, the first thing that came to mind was how I remember him having a really bad physique.
A horrible physique, just a really ugly body.
And I hate that that's the first thing I think of when I should be thinking of the fighting, but I just can't help it.
Well, rumor is he was a great wrestler, but I never really saw great wrestling out of him.
So was it Anthony Njoku? No,
it wasn't Anthony Njoku.
It would have been.
It was in UFC. It was after WEC.
Oh, UFC.
So he was fighting a UFC fighter. It was Thiago Tavares.
Thiago Tavares.
Now, if you guys don't remember Thiago Tavares, he was a very good prospect. And what was that? That was featherweight, right? So he was a big featherweight prospect.
He kind of reminded me of Thiago Tavares. His fighting style almost reminded me of like a Dos Anjos, like kind of a solid all around game, real physical.
Yeah, very good. Like calculated physical effort, like that kind of like knows when to explode.
Very sharp.
Yeah, sharp,
controlled, explosive. Yeah,
really good grappling, really good striking, just clean movements. Everything looked real pretty, and he fought Shane Roller, who just looked like
he rolled off the couch.
Like seriously, just god awful. Like
that Shane Roller,
like someone dropped a glazed ham in a barbershop. Just real bad to look at.
He reminded me of a mini Matt Lindland. Or something like that.
That's a good way of putting it. But Matt Lindland's a real good example of someone who just has an awful body, but was a
we're just talking about reputable.
He was a reputable.
Who's got the best
wrestler.
Body in the UFC?
The best body in the UFC. Jeez, I don't know.
That's a tough call. You know, I know who it is. It's that 100. He just kind of popped up on the scene. That 185-pound dude. The fuck is that guy's name? He just fought not long ago. He looks like a fucking Incredible Hulk.
185.
He just fought Johnny Hendricks. What is this dude's name?
I didn't even see it. I heard about it. I'm missing way too many fights lately.
I just tried to Wikipedia Johnny Hendricks, and you guys will have to forgive me. I accidentally Wikipedia Jimi Hendrix. Give me a second here. I've got the wrong
autocorrect. It's
Hendrix.
It's iPad problems.
Yeah, but no, Johnny Hendricks fought this dude. This guy is massive. He's a Brazilian guy. I'm just about to find him. Paulo Costa. If you guys haven't seen Paulo Costa, this dude is massive. I don't even know how this guy makes the 145-pound limit. Or, sorry, 185-pound limit. This guy is just massive. I mean, it's ridiculous. And, he fought Johnny Hendricks. Clearly, Johnny Hendricks is fallen on some hard times. And
Johnny Hendricks has really not showed a lot of his former glory, and there's speculation that it has to do with the USADA testing and everything. I don't know if that's really it, or if he just is one of the Jesus Christ.
This guy is bodied up. I mean, it is insanity.
That is outrageous.
So Keith just saw Paulo Costa for the first time, and this guy
looks like a fucking action figure.
I don't know how this guy passes the drug test, because to me this is if this guy's not on performance enhancers, like it's insanity. Because this guy,
we need to, like, for people like that, we need to have a different division, just the superhuman division, where
it's kind
like,
of unfair.
You don't get to fight with normal people if your body is like that.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. If you guys haven't seen this dude, look him up.
He looks like he's
is,
carved out of wood with some veins.
He really does. He's massive. He's just huge. In any case, he's also a really good fighter. He kind of reminds me of like a young Vitor Belfort. He's super, super explosive. He's got a few knockouts on his record.
What you're kidding me? A guy like that's explosive. Like, I would never have thought.
Yeah, but yeah. Speaking of which, I wanted to touch on that the Osada thing with Johnny Hendricks.
Right.
It's really. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and man, Osada coming in has really exposed who, some guys, man. It's really exposed who was on the stuff.
A lot of people are just starting to develop these beer bellies.
And man, from the second they came in, some of these guys, they didn't even try and hide it.
Yeah.
Like some of these dudes just fell off the second they came in. Hendricks being one of them. Now, granted, you can always give him the benefit of the doubt, but
well, he also, here's my thing with Hendricks, and this is probably wrong. And this is not what I like necessarily believe, but this is a theory, just to play devil's advocate a little bit. Johnny Hendricks was this incredibly hardworking, incredibly driven beast of a wrestler, and he often talked about his got to be number one. There is nothing but number one. He had that Ricky Bobby mentality. You ain't first, you're last. Like, he was very about that. And he fucking fell off when he lost.
Yeah.
He had a loss and, did not recover. He started missing weight consistently. He opened a restaurant.
Supposedly that was horrible.
Yeah.
It was called Big Rigs, I think.
Great. Yeah, of course. But yeah, he had this whole series of things. And I think, once he wasn't the best and he wasn't just knocking everyone out that he came across, he didn't care anymore. And it's just I can see that. It's oh man, I can't be number one, and it just broke him.
Yeah.
But most likely, it was the Osada thing.
It was the Osada thing.
That's way more likely.
I mean, and there are some dudes. I mean, obviously, the most obvious one was Vitor. He literally just deflated. I remember when Vitor got back on TRT. You didn't even have to tell me, because I remember the fight. It was
like he was 19 again.
Yeah, well, he came back to UFC.
Was it Luke Rockhold?
No,
kicked him and knocked his fucking head off?
No, it was he came back to UFC. He fought Rich Franklin, knocked out Rich Franklin. He wasn't on TRT when he fought Rich Franklin, or if he was, it wasn't obvious.
He looked saggy,
yeah,
and he looked old, but he was still dangerous. He was still a guy with a lifetime of
he was
world-class
still
fighting.
Young.
Yeah,
he was still young at that point, because he had came into the UFC when he was 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, he had his fight with Anderson, I think, and Anderson just had the classic front kick to the face knockout, one of the best knockouts ever. It was after that fight when he fought
the one that Steven Seagal taught him.
The one that Steven Seagal taught him. Yes, it was after that fight he fought Akiyama. That was the fight where he got back on TRT. I remember the reason I remember this is because we watched it in this house that we're in right now. And it was a pay-per-view. I think it was Tito Ortiz versus Forrest Griffin, and it was supposed to be Tito's retirement fight in the UFC. And I remember Vitor walking out, and I was like, "What the fuck happened to this guy? Did Ronnie Coleman come in and take over on this guy's strength and conditioning program over the last few months, or what?" But I remember him coming out, and I was like, "Oh man, fucking." Akiyama is in trouble because Vitor is back on the sauce, and that's
juiced up Vitor isn't something anybody wants to be anywhere close to.
And it was the first thing I said, and sure enough, he absolutely starched Akiyama. And how you can always tell when Vitor is back on the sauce is his traps come back. He's got massive traps when he's on steroids. Mm-hmm. I say all this like I'm his fucking growth hormone doctor or something, and I know, but. That's what happens.
Studies the bodies of his,
that's what happens
of his fighters quite rigorously.
So Vitor is one of them. He definitely has looked horrible since USADA came in. Another one would be Eric Silva. Has looked really, really bad. I mean, his physique just completely changed. Obviously, Overeem is another one.
This is a totally different era, but I want to take you guys back in time for a second. on this same concept, the same point in conversation. But if any of you have your cell phones in front of you or on a laptop, I want you to go online and look up Tim Sylvia when he fought Wesley Cabbage Carrera.
Now, was this Tim Sylvia when he was actually...
That was Tim Sylvia when
not
he
out of
was...
shape?
That was when he was on steroids.
Yeah.
Before I want to mention, before he became champion.
Yeah.
And it was the funniest thing how, like, immediately after he got busted for steroids, his first thing that he said was, I don't even take them for performance. I just take them because I have a really bad body. It's like, I don't want to look like shit.
Well, and
that
by
was
the
his
time-
statement. And when he did, when he did get clean, you could see he still... I never really thought Tim Sylvia was a great fighter, but he was effective because of his size and everything. He had the best run of his career and fought just about the same way after he got off steroids.
Yeah,
but
he did.
He just had this hilariously awful body. He looked like fucking Play-Doh. It was horrible.
He looked like shit.
But do you remember how, like, that 6'7" monster had traps and pecs, and he looked like an action figure at 265 pounds
Yep.
when he fought Carrera? Like, that is the biggest body change that I've ever seen.
It's
like,
it's
from
pretty
steroids.
insane. And did Tim Sylvia he beat Nogueira, right? He did beat Nogueira, or did Nogueira beat? No, Nogueira.
No,
beat
Nogueira
him.
tapped him out.
Nogueira
Yeah,
tapped
it was
him out.
he was
That was
beating
he-
Nogueira. It was
ended
really
Sylvia's run, right?
Yeah, it was really close. He was like beating up Nogueira, and then Nogueira caught him in the guillotine.
Is Tim Sylvia the most hated champion ever? He's up there. People really didn't like.
How about
Tim
Dave
Sylvia.
Monet? Does everybody remember that Dave Monet was a champion for a while?
No, it's funny actually. Until you mentioned
Yeah.
that, I totally forgot that he was even a champion.
I don't think he was hated. I think he was just,
just
nobody
very-
gave a shit.
Yeah, not well known. Yeah, definitely. That was a dark age when Tim Sylvia.
Well, he got
was
it. He got
champion.
it from Murilo Bustamante, who I think must have like died or something. I don't know what happened there, but he I don't even think he beat Murilo Bustamante. I think he lost to him, and then like Bustamante retired, or he had the belt stripped from him for some reason. And then it just went by default to Dave Monet, who I think immediately lost it afterwards. I would have to look this up to confirm it, but I don't actually remember what happened. But he was the most lackluster of champions. But Tim Sylvia may be the most disliked, like aggressively, outwardly disliked of champions.
He was just, from what I remember about Tim Sylvia is just, I just don't remember like looking forward to his fights. Like he was just kind of blah. He was just, there's just something about him where you just didn't really look forward to a Tim Sylvia fight. I remember I was so happy when Randy Couture came back and he beat him. That was like mind blowing. Because I think everybody had just kind of assumed that Couture was done at that age.
That was the coolest thing about Couture, is that he just kept coming back and being like effective.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
He was never out of the game at any point.
No. I think, well, except for, I guess, when he fought Machida in his last fight, I think that was probably the point when
He
we were
had
kind
no
of
business. Stylistically, he had no business.
That was a rough fight. I don't know why they put him in that fight.
I would say even in his prime, stylistically, he had no business in there with
No,
with
that's a
Machida.
rough fight for Randy Couture on any night.
Machida's too explosive, dynamic. His in and out striking is too sharp and fast, and his takedown defense for his generation was like some of the best takedown defense in the game.
Well, and while we were on the topic of USADA, that's another one that people are claiming could be attributed to USADA coming in.
Really?
I've heard that, yeah. But
you know what? I haven't really been paying a lot of attention to Machida's recent fights, so.
Well, undoubtedly, I think there's one thing that we learned when USADA came in. I don't want to make a blanket statement here, but I'm going to make a blanket statement.
Yeah.
I think Brazilians like steroids. And I think once USADA came in, that kind of showed that maybe... I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. I think Americans like steroids too. I think any country and any...
I think I've got a bigger blanket for you here. In the fight game, everyone is on
Everybody
steroids.
likes steroids.
Yeah, I think I know. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who pride themselves in the fact they don't take steroids. I know. I just think it's such a prevalent thing in the world of fighting sports. There's so many people taking steroids. It's tremendous. It's almost like the fucking Tour de France shit, where like everyone's doping.
Right. Well, and I think that's
like,
something you realize more and more the deeper you get entrenched into any competitively based anything. I mean, even something that isn't necessarily competitively based. Like one thing I was always very naive to, I've been a gym rat since I was like 14, 15 years old.
Just the big dudes at the gym.
Yeah, and that was something.
Yeah.
And like, when I would just get to talking with people, and they'd be like, "Hey, what are you taking?" I'm like, nothing. I barely even take supplements.
Yeah.
Let alone like, I'll maybe take creatine for like a month, and I'm like, I don't feel like spending money on this anymore.
Yeah.
And I'll stop taking it. So I barely will even take supplements. And
Personally, I notice a very, very minuscule, if anything at all, difference based on what I'm taking as supplements.
Right. Yeah. No. Supplements. People are just pissing money on this shit, and it's like
it's a placebo most of the time.
I think it is a placebo most of the time, and then like 90% of the time when they test this shit, it doesn't even have what they say they have in it. It's just total horse shit. And people, look, at the end of the day, people want a shortcut from hard work. What they don't realize is that if you want to gain appreciable amounts of muscle, strength, speed, whatever it may be, it takes time. Now don't get me wrong. You do have people that are naturally more athletic than others, and they're going to maybe, make gains quicker. However, when I look at where I was 10 years ago in, weightlifting or exercise or whatever, I'm not even, I'm not even half then of what I am now. I'm way better conditioned now, way stronger, and it took time to get to that point. And, being, like I said, in and out of gyms, working at gyms, being in that environment, I would meet guys, and I still meet guys all the time, who they don't even know what it's like to work out or train without taking steroids. They've never done it. So to me, that's crazy, because it's like you don't even know what your actual genetic potential is without it. And then every time they get off of this stuff, they completely lose the motivation to train. And that's the thing that scares me about it, is because trust me.
Same. I had that same, like, I took 17 HD one time when I was in high school. And I guess that's like progesterone or something that it has in it. It has like a form of testosterone. Yeah. So it's basically like a little shot of steroids. Mm-hmm. So I tried that before. And it gave me such a boost where I was just like, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do pull-ups, and it was great. It had a really good in the gym feeling. And I did it that one time, and I was like, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, no. And now, if you guys don't know, there are some of you who are gonna know what 17 HD is, and I remember that stuff because it was when I was I remember I was 17 at the time, so it wasn't that long after I started working out. And I remember a buddy of mine had 17 HD. He was like, "Yeah, dude, try this stuff, try this." And I remember I was real hesitant. So kind of the same thing. I took it that one time, and I was instantly added 4 to 5 repetitions to my bench press.
Pretty sure my dick got bigger when I took that stuff.
I instantly added 5 inches to my penis.
Yeah.
No, but I remember right away I was such a noticeable strength gain that it was borderline scary.
Yeah. I added reps to my It literally it was just like cheating. It was like I just added muscle to my body. My cardio is better. I'm like,
right.
It didn't.
Well, I think typically what people don't realize is that typically if you take something that makes you improve that quickly, it's probably also going to plateau very quickly, I think, and it's also going to be difficult to maintain those improvements.
So, like you were talking about earlier, I wanted to touch on this. People have a way of looking at working out where they look at it as I want to get this result. I want to achieve this. I want to attain this ability to do this. And when it comes to any sort of physical fitness or physical activity, you have to really look at things as they are. There's no faking it. You know, like you can cheat and take steroids and that'll help you get there faster, but you have to really understand that you're not really building something, you're conditioning and adapting.
Right.
So you have to experience what you're trying to do. You have to experience simulated versions of what you're trying to do and get good at. And you have to struggle so that your body adapts to it. It's like microevolution within your lifetime. You're not just going like, well, I want to be in better shape, so I got to start doing curls. It's like, no, what is your goal? What are you trying to what kind of better shape are you trying to get into?
Right.
So you have to subject yourself to those conditions so that your body conditions to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the thing that a lot of times, and I think that's a big mistake that people will make when they look at exercise or they're getting into exercises. They don't have a clear goal in mind. Even just something I've learned through, I've got my marathon coming up in a week, and I used to do tons of running. Like I remember even when I was doing my martial arts training back in the day, I was always doing my running and my conditioning and stuff like that. And I was running like 7 to 12 miles a day. And, I'd kind of gotten away from that, and I'd spent a few years where I was just doing like, deadlifts and squats and just heavy lifting, and I was still getting conditioning in, but in the form of weightlifting. But then I kind of forgot what true conditioning was. And people have this idea that if you set up a circuit and you do your set of bench press and then move right into a set of squats and deadlifts. Now, don't get me wrong, that'll get your heart rate up, but when you're doing that, what people fail to understand is that you are pumping blood to your muscles. So you're taking blood and pumping it to your muscles. You're getting a pump. When you're doing true aerobic conditioning, like running or like a long cycle or something like that, what you're doing is you're making your body more efficient and taking blood away from the muscles and pumping it to the heart. So there are two different kinds of conditioning. You can't replicate aerobic conditioning necessarily with weightlifting because they're two fundamentally different things. And I had to separate the two. I had to learn how to compartmentalize the two. When I would go for my runs, as I got more adapted to it, I remembered, this is what it feels like to have an efficient and a heart that is a more efficient at pumping blood.
An aerobic
component,
system,
yeah. And I was trying to get the best of both worlds, but I was kind of shortchanging myself by combining the two because they actually fundamentally work better when they're separated.
Right. That reminds me. There's like a property when I went through NASM that I kind of learned, because I would always try to basically the idea is you want to make it as hard as possible. You want to make everything as hard as possible, but essentially you don't want to make your workout as hard on you as possible. What you want to do is you want to position yourself in a way that you can do it the best way possible.
Yeah.
Like if you want to increase your high jump, you want to jump as high as you can.
Right. Yes.
Whatever the conditions are that allow you to jump your highest, you want to keep pushing the limit on that. You don't want to do stuff that's going to make your high jump harder.
Right.
That'll increase your muscle. Like if you do squats and then you tie weights to your waist and then you jump as high as you can, that'll make your legs stronger, but it's not going to increase your high jump. That's just going to make your legs stronger.
Yeah, and that's, I've had people ask me about that in the past. They're like, well, what if I go and do sprints with like a weighted vest or something like that? Yeah. And it's they've actually done studies. There's a book I read where they talked about how they've done studies where they've actually found that overspeed. Now there's a point of diminishing returns where you can add a small amount of resistance to increase your sprint, but it's a very small amount. It's not as much as people would assume.
Right.
I think most people might think that, well, if I could sprint just as fast with a 40-pound weight vest on as I can without, then I'll be faster. No, you'll just be better with a 40-pound weight vest off. It's not necessarily going to increase your total speed. Yeah. So the point that the book was trying to make was that overspeed training can be just as effective as if you're doing a uphill sprint, if you do a downhill sprint, because you're forcing when you sprint downhill, let's say at a slight decline, you're able to increase the speed, and you're actually forcing your body to adapt to a faster speed than it's used to. So there's different ways of doing it.
It goes back to conditioning and adaptation. You're forcing your body to adapt to moving at a higher speed. But when you keep adding resistance, well, then you're forcing your body to adapt to having resistance instead of adapting to increasing the speed.
Yes.
I had these guys in a class the other day that not a class I was teaching. My coach had us go like, pick up some light weights and start shadow boxing. And you got like fucking dumb shits picking up like 10-pound weights. I've got little 2-pound weights because I know how to throw a punch.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going like, if you pick up a 10-pound weight and you start pushing it around, you're getting used to pushing around a 10-pound weight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's not the point. We're picking up a little 2-pound weight so that we're getting used to shooting out a tiny little weight. Pop, 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 pop. And I told him, I was like, if you guys are doing this right, this shouldn't be harder than just throwing your fists around.
Right.
The weight should carry your punch.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. They have this really cool thing that they just came out with, and it's by this guy named David Weck. He's the guy who invented the Bosu ball. I don't know if he invented it. I think actually Paul Chek takes. Anyways, who cares?
Regardless,
stupid fucking half ball. So this guy he came out with these things called pulsers, and they're little, couple pound weights. I think they vary in size, but they're like 2 little hand weights that have a shifting weight on the inside of them. Mm-hmm. So the idea is when you use these shifting weights in your hands, when you do your running or your sprinting, they actually, as the weight shifts, it actually helps to pull you forward through your gait cycle.
Okay.
So I've actually been curious to try those. I've seen them pop up. I don't know how effective they are, but I kind of liked the idea of it because it's the same concept. You're taking a light enough weight to kind of help propel you.
Right. It's not necessarily meant to add resistance. It's helping you.
No, exactly.
It's helping you move correctly.
Yes, exactly.
Put the right kind of energy into your movement. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually I'm actually guilty of this. I went to for the first time ever, like 2 months ago, I went to a bar class. Have you ever heard of that?
A bar class?
Yeah. So it's like a mix of. I've been doing this hot yoga pretty consistently for the last few months. And I'd already been doing yoga on my own for like 10 years. So I'm pretty used to the yoga and any kind of like yoga, Pilates, fusion, bodyweight stuff. But I go to this bar class and I made the mistake of doing it on a Monday, and I do my long runs on a Sunday. So my calves were just completely wrecked, so tight. I go to this bar class and it's a mix of ballet, Pilates, and yoga. Mm-hmm. And I made the mistake of they have all these weights laid out, and I see all the other girls. I was the only guy in the class, by the way. There was like 30 people, and I just looked like probably a fucking creep in there. But
well, you know what? You have the thing going for that. You're obviously like a fitness guy. Like I'm sure you showed up in like your straight up like North Face gear or whatever.
I had my compression. I had my compression tights on. Yeah.
Yeah. No one's looking at you going, "This fucking weirdo's in here." Like, no, he probably belongs in this fitness class.
Yeah.
Like,
I came in with a beret and some glasses, and I had a camera and a ponytail. No. So. I go into this class and I see all the other girls. I said all the other girls, like
all the other girls.
All the other
girls
in the class had some really light weight. So all the girls.
I was
in the class,
bitch with the biggest weights in the class.
Yes. So I go over there and I grab the 10-pound dumbbells, not realizing that you're gonna do like fucking hundreds of reps with these tiny little dumbbells, and it was really hard. It was a super difficult class. I don't think I would have had that much trouble with it had I been fresh. But as I said, my calves are really tight from this run the day before, and a lot of it you're just balancing on the ball of the foot because it's like ballet moves. I actually, though, it was a really cool class. I enjoyed it for the most part. The only part I didn't like is they have you get on the floor and you do like a zillion like hip bridges and booty thrusts, and
dude,
it's definitely catered towards women in that regard. I could have used some penis thrusts,
some dick thrusts. Probably would have been more functional for me to do some dick thrusts.
Yes, exactly. I want to be a functional man.
Well, those would be the Osuzis, or as my coach likes to call them, tiger push-ups. You know what I'm talking about, right?
No,
you get up.
Tiger push-up?
It's you get up. You have a really narrow stance where your feet are really wide. your ass is up in the air and you get a narrow stance with your hands and you do this little like dip move where you drop your face to your chest, to your hands.
Like a dive bomber
yeah,
push-up.
and then you basically like hump the ground.
Right.
And then you push yourself back up.
Yeah.
And, traditionally you would say 1-0 Susie.
Right.
2-0
Okay,
Susie.
I got you. Yeah. Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know what Keith is describing, it's like a... They also call them like dive bomber push-ups, or I think they also even call them judo push-ups.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah. But those are pretty tough. Those are
fucking
cool
hard,
workout.
man.
Yeah.
But those are what I would assume a dick thrust would be. If you were comparing, a hip thrust to like, a booty lift, bridge.
Well, as a trainer, one thing I've noted is that people just neglect their private parts when they're training. They should strengthen their sexual organs.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just that people are uncomfortable increasing the power of their genitals.
Which brings us to our next point. Me and Keith got into this. We're sales reps for this really interesting new product. You guys might want to. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's basically like it's a little latch you hook onto either your penis or your clitoris, whichever one. Yeah, no, we're kidding. It's still in its prototype phase. We haven't even tested it yet. We're trying to work out like a joint thing, like a buddy system where we could latch it to each other's penises and then see. So I don't know if we're gonna do it like a spotter thing or if we're gonna work against each other. So
we need to patent this ASAP.
We can't release this until we patent the dick thruster.
So, we've definitely we spent a lot of time diving into the martial arts here, diving into the exercise.
I'd like that we did that, but yeah, I'm ready. We got other stuff to talk about.
Yes.
Like, yeah, for sure.
So what else do we have to talk about? I mean, I saw some movies recently that were pretty good.
Yeah, give me some intel on the new stuff you watch. I noticed you watched a few things like you saw that Quiet Place movie.
Yeah, I saw A Quiet Place. That was pretty good. It was I wouldn't describe it as a horror movie as much as I would like it was kind of like a thriller, science fiction type, end of the world apocalypse type movie. Mm-hmm. Very interesting concept because the creatures in the movie respond to sound.
Okay.
So the whole kind of premise of the movie is that you can't make a sound. Now, when you have a premise like that where you can't make a sound, there's a lot of plot holes. And that had those. Okay, I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of stuff that didn't quite add up where you're like, wait a minute, how come they can make this sound but they can't make that sound? And there's a lot of stuff like that. But there was also a lot of really clever stuff, and it was a really, really good, really well done movie. And probably the biggest thing I was surprised by when I saw this movie was that it went by so fast. It was like a 90-minute movie. It was kind of standard length. But I just remember feeling like this movie was like a half hour. Like I just couldn't believe how fast it went by. So I was really, really kind of immersed in the experience of this movie.
Okay. And so it set a tone well. And drew you in.
It really pulled you in, and you were kind of just waiting to see what was going to happen next.
Would you attribute that to acting, cinematography,
the
soundtrack?
The cinematography didn't really stand out to me. It was more so the acting was solid. The acting was very, very solid.
Okay.
I did a review on it, and I had mentioned how I think Emily Blunt has to be my favorite actress because she's just like so good in everything. She gives such an emotional performance. And same thing too. The guy was really good, John Krasinski, and he actually directed it as well.
I never really gave too much thought to Emily Blunt, but that's a good point. I mean, my thing with her is she doesn't really overact badly. I've never noticed her in anything where I've just been like, God, can you fucking dial it back a little bit? Jesus
Christ. Doesn't. She gives just enough. And that's actually, there was another movie I reviewed the other day where I specifically noted that as the problem. I reviewed Magnolia the other day. Okay. And if you guys haven't seen Magnolia,
it's been a while for sure.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic movie. It's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. He's the same guy who did Boogie Nights and The Master, Inherent Vice. He kind of is known to kind of go against the grain a little bit and do some kind of wacky stuff. But Magnolia came out in 2000, I think, and it's a really good movie overall. It has a masterful performance by Tom Cruise. I think it's got his best performance ever. And there's Tom Cruise in the movie. I'll throw some spoilers out there because this movie's been out for almost 20 years now. And if you haven't seen it by now, you should go fuck yourself.
Yeah, it's you can get over it. If you get a spoiler on a 20-year-old movie,
there's a statute of limitations. So Tom Cruise in the movie plays this character named Frank T.J. Mackey, and he's like it's kind of like God, what's that guy? Neil Strauss. There's a guy named Neil Strauss. I think that's his name. I might be getting that wrong. Neil something.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Anyways, there's this guy though who wrote this book about he's like a pickup artist basically, and that's essentially what Tom Cruise is in this movie. He's a very vulgar pickup artist who talks about like the power of the cock and how you have to control the cunt, and it's just really and it's really and it's he just plays this kind of awful guy, and it's just like a very powerful performance because he's very conflicted and he's got these daddy issues. And one of the aspects of the movie is that his dad is dying, and he has to go see him before his father dies, and he has to kind of confront his father, and he just gives this like I don't think I've ever seen Tom Cruise give a performance like this, because Tom Cruise will typically kind of do the big action movies, stuff like that, and in this performance, I mean, he's just like, it's raw, like he's crying, it seems like it's just this guttural kind of from his very soul, so if you guys haven't seen that, it's worth seeing just for watching that alone. And there's some other good performances in it. John C. Reilly, William H. Macy. But there's one performance in particular that I absolutely hated in this movie, and it really affected the way I looked at the movie. And I don't even remember the woman's name because she was only in a few movies, and she was in Boogie Nights as well, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. And she was actually pretty good in Boogie Nights, but in this movie, she plays a cokehead. And, I've known a lot of cokeheads, and they don't behave anything like this woman. I mean, it's just like this over-the-top, constantly taking a deep breath in, like just too much to the point.
She wasn't trying to start a business with anyone or
No, it was just
write a screenplay, nothing like that. Because that's what cokeheads do.
No, this woman had no ambition. Her only ambition in life was to do more coke. So she was a true cokehead, but her performance was really odd. And if you guys happen to watch Magnolia, I'd really appreciate if you have seen it or if you plan on watching it, I'd like you guys to watch it. And I would like to hear if I'm not just imagining this performance being over the top or if it really was as bad as I thought it was. But back to A Quiet Place. The performances were good, but really what stood out about A Quiet Place was the concept. Like I said, there was some plot holes, but they made up for the plot holes by doing a lot of really clever things to explain things. In order to avoid making sound so the monsters couldn't hear them, they have to walk. They create like sand paths through the city. So there's a lot of really cool little clever things like that. And although, it might not sound like that big of it, the movie is chocked full of stuff like that. And not to mention, just really what made the movie go by fast to me, I think what immersed me in it so much was the tension. I mean, the tension in this movie is just like, you're just on the edge of your seat. So I would recommend it. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I've passed by it sometimes. I've seen some trailers for it. I haven't actually watched it yet, but it just looked interesting to me because I'm a big horror movie fan. That's like my favorite genre. Mm-hmm. And supposedly this is a good one. It seems like rarer and rarer they're coming out with horror movies that are really worth a person's time. You have to kind of look for good ones to watch. A lot of the time, the mainstream ones that are released are actually some of the worst ones. So you kind of have to dig for good horror movies. So when one comes out that's kind of celebrated and is getting some attention, to me that's worth looking into.
I think you're going to see kind of a resurgence in horror, though. I think
fucking hope so, man.
Well, I think here's my prediction. I have a feeling with like the success of It. Did you end up seeing It?
I did. I liked it.
Yeah,
it was funny. It was like
here's what It was to me. It was like the Avengers of horror movies.
okay.
It was like it was just scary enough. It had a kind of a Freddy Krueger-esque protagonist. It had not in the sense that it was similar to Freddy Krueger, but he has a charismatic. It kind of reminded me of those '80s genre of horror movies in that you have a main protagonist. Like It is almost like the superhero of the movie.
I get what you mean. Like how the character is the villain, is the one who's killing everybody.
Yeah. Antagonist, I should say, not protagonist.
Protagonist is probably a good way of putting it, because protagonist doesn't necessarily mean the good guy. The good guy, like, that's not what a protagonist is. The character, it's the character that the story circulates around, and in this, it's more about it than it is about any of the kids.
Yeah,
it's same with Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees,
Michael Myers. Those became like household names. I mean, those characters like Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy Krueger, Hellraiser, Candyman, all that shit, Chucky, Leprechaun. Those were like the universal monsters of the 80s and 90s.
And that's a really interesting thing to like put those together, because I didn't realize how long of a period of time we had the killer and the villain of horror movies, where they had so much personality, where they weren't just these like demonic figures that were snatching you out of reality and murdering you in whatever creative or gruesome way that they can. They would have these fucking quips and like funny shit they would say before they kill you, or like they'd make jokes, and it was just like,
yeah, they became characters into themselves. And they, there was I watched a couple horror movie documentaries that kind of take note of that. And one of the ones I was watching was a Nightmare on Elm Street documentary that was really interesting. And they have interviews with Wes Craven on there, because he directed, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And he talks about when that shift happened. And he talked about how, Freddy Krueger was kind of the first horror villain that you kind of rooted for. You wanted to see Freddy Krueger kill some people. And there's actually a really interesting, this is part of what makes Wes Craven so brilliant, is that he was so self-aware. He was able to take that thing that happened with Freddy Krueger, where if you guys, I was alive for 1 year of the 80s, but from what I'm told, when a new Freddy Krueger movie would come out, you'd get teenagers going to the theater, and when somebody would die, they would start clapping, they would cheer, people are throwing popcorn around. And Wes Craven is so brilliant because he comes back in the 90s, and he was kind of in a little bit of a slump, and then he starts directing Scream 1 and 2. And there's this thing that he did at the beginning of, and I'm going to tie this back into It, because there was this thing that he did at the beginning of Scream 2, where if you guys remember at the beginning of that movie, it's I think it's Omar Epps and Jada Pinkett Smith. They're a couple, and they go to see Scream, but it's called Stab in the movie.
They're watching
They go to see
Stab.
Stab. Yeah. And remember, the audience is cheering. They're like, "Don't answer the phone," and like everybody's throwing popcorn around. It's this big old crazy event, right? When I went to go see it was like that. It was the strangest thing.
Yeah.
I've never been to a horror movie where this happened. So we went to go see it on opening night.
Like a totally interactive crowd.
Exactly.
And everything. Yeah.
Yes. And I've never been to a horror movie where it was like that. We go to see it on opening night, and it was mostly like 19, 18-year-olds. And I was like, fuck, I hate teenagers. But that's beside the point. So, mostly younger crowd. And there's a scene at the beginning of the new It. Spoiler alert, go fuck yourself if you haven't seen it. New one where in the first 10 minutes of the movie, Georgie gets his arm ripped off, and It carries it back into the sewer. When Georgie got his arm ripped off, I couldn't believe it. The entire crowd started cheering.
Like, clapping. Fuck that little kid. Yeah. Rip his arm off.
They were like, yeah. They started cheering and clapping. The whole crowd.
Yeah.
It was like being at a football game.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. But it was so, to me, it was so powerful because it was coming full circle. You had Freddy Krueger in the 1980s where people would go to see his movies and do that. You had Scream 2 where Wes Craven he was very self-aware, and he kind of almost critiqued that and made a commentary on that. And then here we are, another 20 years later, And it's again, it just goes to show you what people really truly love about horror movies is they like to go and be scared and have fun.
So I think there's a specific brand of levity that comes with horror movies where it's like we're going so far off the deep end of evil and cruelty and shit that we shouldn't be okay with.
Right.
But we're so far off the deep end with it. It's like it's almost like it comes full circle with comedy.
Yes.
It's a different kind of satisfaction, but it's a similar. It's a different brand, but it's a similar kind. Like
yes. It's the most. I think it's the most mainstream of the horror brands, right?
Well, it's a visceral kind of enjoyment.
Yeah.
It's purely like this isn't poetry. This isn't fucking Shakespeare. This is blood and guts and nightmares, and we're just gonna enjoy it for the extremity that it is.
Right.
Not, it's like I was listening to Jim Jeffries talk the other day about how if it wasn't comedy, what he's saying is horrible.
Right.
But it's comedy. If it wasn't a horror movie, if we were watching fucking clowns with razor teeth rip little boys' arms off, we'd be horrified.
Right.
But we're watching it on a movie where it's not real and it's fucking fun because of it.
Yeah, and I think that's where, you get these remember like back in the late 90s after like Columbine happened and you had all these like senators and
violent video games are the cause of our
and it's like, no, they're kind of totally missing the point with that. Like if somebody is a psychopath and they have mental health issues and they're gonna go and shoot up a bunch of people or do whatever, they were gonna have those issues regardless. A fucking video game or a movie is not gonna send them over the edge.
What was that movie that was big when we were kids? We were pretty young when it came. I think it was like Paradise Lost. It was that documentary about those kids that got arrested.
Paradise Lost was a really, really good documentary about they called them the West Memphis Three.
Because they were arrested like almost solely on the fact that they were like goth kids and they listened to Metallica.
Yes, yeah, and they lived in a real kind of
it was like a
southern
town. It was a really
yeah.
small southern town.
Yeah, and they were the only kind of like metal.
They were heavily discriminated against because of that.
And they were falsely accused, and then they were imprisoned for like I think they did like
was it murder? So they murdered.
It was murder.
Like somebody got murdered.
A couple of I think it was one or two children.
They were like, well, these devil worshiper kids with their Metallica posters and their black hair, and it was like,
and they were falsely accused, and they got released. They got released.
Did they?
Yeah,
they
got released in the last few. I think it was like 5 years ago, maybe.
So recently, because this documentary came out when we were fucking kids.
Yeah, they did.
Really
I think they did at least 20 years. I want to say, but they did a lot of time. And the guy the main guy of the three, I don't know why, he just kind of stood out. His name is Damien Echols.
Yeah, I remember that fucking name, Damien Echols.
He does like a lot of speeches now, and I think he kind of speaks against that whole thing, like false imprisonment.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good. That's a pretty standard thing to be against.
Here's the fucked up thing: is they released.
You know what? I'm pro false imprisonment. We need to see more innocent people behind bars.
Here's the thing: like the really funny, not even funny, just sad thing about that is even when they released them, they did it with a prerequisite that Damien Echols and the other two guys that were in prison, they had to go back and plead like what was it? They had to go back and plead they still had to plead guilty or something like that in order to be released.
Really?
So it was like kind of this fucked up thing where the judge was like, it's almost like they knew they were wrong, but they didn't want to fully admit it. So
they can't really accept that this is our fault. So
right. So the kids, these poor kids, still had to admit some kind of guilt despite not being guilty of anything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just shows you how fucked up the justice system is over there.
What an outrageous thing too, that like, what that is the courts going like, well, we're never going to catch the guy who actually did this, so we got to pin it on somebody.
Right.
So it's like, we're just going to pretend like we got it right.
Yeah.
we know for sure that we did
wrong.
Yeah.
And one thing
how did we get onto this? Because
we were talking about horror movies, and then that's what I wanted to come back to because I was thinking about
the effects of media on society.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to I don't know if you heard, they're releasing a new Halloween this October.
Are they?
Yeah, and it's
They
really
do that every
no,
couple
but
years.
listen,
but
all right,
like,
there's a twist, okay?
Is it
Now-
still Rob Zombie directing it?
No,
'Cause-
thank
all right,
God.
Good.
Because Rob Zombie. Now I've met people who enjoyed the Rob Zombie Halloweens, and I don't think they were absolutely terrible. But here's why the Rob Zombie Halloweens are fundamentally bad. Rob Zombie took what made Michael Myers scary and he ripped it all apart. So if you think back to me now, if you were to ask me, what's your single favorite horror movie of all time? Like, what is the most scary horror movie to me? It's Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
I think Halloween is like the creepiest. Just like the scene at the beginning where, Michael Myers...
Y'all don't want to go down this road
You
with
don't
me.
wanna
I'm
go
going to
down
tell
this
you
road.
about some shit that's going to fuck
Alright.
your nightmares
So
up.
the scene where Michael Myers is following Jamie Lee Curtis and you just get little glimpses of him, and then at the end when he's to me my single scariest movie scene of all time is when Jamie Lee Curtis is in the closet and Michael Myers bursts through the closet and like she's like stabs him with a wire coat hanger or something like that.
And he's just like...
Yeah, and he's just so creepy. And so what was scary about Michael Myers, though, is they give you just very little information about what made Michael Myers what he was. All they give you is that he killed his sister when he was young, and he's just an evil kid. But they don't explain why he's evil.
And he's essentially like... He's essentially inhuman.
He's inhuman, yeah.
He's the shell of a human,
Right.
But he has no empathy. He
Yes.
has nothing relatable.
When
he doesn't
Dr.
speak. He
yes,
doesn't.
yes. When Donald, is it Donald Sutherland? I don't remember his name, but when Dr. Loomis in the movie, his Michael Myers, his
it wasn't
psychiatrist.
Are you talking about in the newer one or in
no,
the older
in the
one?
older one. In the older
Yeah,
one,
definitely wasn't Donald Sutherland. I
It
don't,
wa-
I don't
yeah,
actually
it
know
wasn't
that guy's
Donald
name.
Sutherland. I don't
I
remember
know
his
the
name.
actor.
But Dr. Loomis is his name in the movie, and he's talking about Michael Myers, and he goes, he has the blackest eyes. And when he's talking about him, what he's telling you is, he's basically telling you that this kid is unbelievably evil. Like there's no redeeming qualities in him. You can't fix this kid.
There's no humanity
No.
in this.
And what Rob Zombie did was he took you right away and he showed you the evolution of Michael Myers as a child and showed you his fucked up family background, and he humanized him, which was a mistake. Because the second you humanize the killer and you make them relatable, then you become sympathetic towards them, and then that kind of takes away from the
Takes away fear when they're relatable.
Absolutely.
I like to make this point as well about how there's a physical aspect to the scariness as well. Like in the real world, sure, it's scarier to be attacked by a giant muscle-bound juggernaut of a human being.
Jason Voorhees.
Right, but in the the way that the Michael Myers character is portrayed in the classics, the originals, is this creeping, following, slow-moving, normal-sized guy who can fit in a hallway and everything like everyone else.
Yeah.
And then the Rob Zombie one is this big fucking monster who's like 9 feet tall.
He's like Kane. He's like Kane from the Deputy.
Danny Trejo's head and smashing it through a fucking sink. He's like, I was good to you. Ah!
Yeah, it's just so. All right, so
I just find that less scary. I think that's more like
It is less
real
scary.
world that would be scary, but as a movie, the way that character is, it's not the same. It doesn't give you the same sort of like tension. This like
No, and that's what Halloween did masterfully. The original Halloween was that the tension in that movie is just creeps up on you little by little, little by little. And John Carpenter is just a genius because he went in there and he actually Halloween is actually the highest grossing independent movie of all time. He made that movie on like almost no budget. And he really, when John Carpenter made that movie, he put his balls on the line because he told them he was barely getting the movie made out as it was, but he was insistent. If you look at all the old Halloween movie posters, it says John Carpenter's Halloween.
yeah.
At the time, it was considered very high praise if a director could put Stanley Kubrick's 2001, or if they could
You only
slap
really
their
put
name
that
on the
if
title.
that movie is
Right.
prestigious.
Right,
Yeah.
and John Carpenter made it a point that they allowed him to do that, and he made a big deal about it.
Yeah.
And they almost didn't let him make the movie because of it. But he knew how important it was to have John Carpenter's Halloween, because he knew that instantly, if this movie was a success and they saw that, it was going to put him on the map. And it did.
He did that with The Thing, too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
which gets a lot of flack now when people look back and watch that movie because it didn't age well. But to be honest, for its time, that was such a fucking
I
excellent
love
movie.
The Thing.
I watch it every once in a while.
The Thing is
Like,
one of my favorite. The Thing is awesome. That's like the ultimate.
It's just
nail biting
yeah.
tension.
Oh,
Type
for sure.
movie.
I mean, what a concept too. Like it was one of the original movies where you're just literally like it could be anyone.
Yeah,
There's
the
no
thing
right
is-
way for this to play out.
The thing is that The Thing is one of those movies where if you're like a movie geek, you love it. Like
Yeah.
The Thing is very well known among movie geeks because it influenced so many things that came after it. But when you try and show it to somebody who's not kind of like a genre fan, they don't really get into it.
Or someone who just hasn't seen it before, and you try to show it to them in fucking 2018,
Right.
they're gonna be like, "Why are they so afraid of all that Play-Doh?" It's
Right,
like,
yeah. And they don't realize how good. I think it was either Rick Baker or Tom Savini that did the special effects on that movie. But the special effects are fucking amazing on that movie. I love that old school actual like animatronic.
I prefer animatronics and
Yeah.
puppetry to
Yeah, I do
CGI like completely. The whole I always call him Benicio del Toro, Guillermo del Toro directing style,
Yeah.
where he always does puppets instead of CGI. It's
yes.
so much better.
He does a
man.
great job of he'll actually throw a little CGI on there, but he'll
Sure.
just kind of layer it on top of the actual physical.
as a tool, but
Yeah.
not as the entire scene.
Exactly.
Like
And he did an amazing job with. If you guys haven't seen Shape of Water,
oh yeah, that movie.
man.
All right, you know what? I just want to throw this out there since we're getting onto Shape of Water. I don't know the actor's name. General Zod. Do you know? Like he was
Michael Shannon.
Michael Shannon. God, he just fucking killed it. He was the funniest guy.
Yeah,
he was so racist.
he's such a creep.
He was so like misogynistic. Everything he said had me and my roommate Richard. We watched it together. Everything he said had me and Richard just in stitches, just cracking up.
Michael Shannon is astounding at playing a creep.
Yeah.
He just plays such a good
he
creep.
was so great. He like gets his finger bit off, and what does the guy say? He's like, "I heard you got yourself a little accident." And he's all, "Well, still got my ring finger, my trigger finger, and my pussy finger." So I'll be all right."
The scene where he's having sex with his wife is disgusting.
Oh,
That's
God.
one of the worst
Yeah.
sex scenes.
It's gruesome.
Guys, check that out. But so let me finish this thing on the Halloween thing. So the new Halloween they're coming out with is produced. I think it's produced by Danny McBride.
I love it already.
Eastbound and Down
Yeah.
fame, who apparently is like a massive Halloween fan. He's producing it. Here's what I love about this new Halloween. They're nixing all the sequels. In this new Halloween, none of the sequels happened. It was only the first Halloween.
Okay.
Great start, because most of the sequels kind of sucked.
Yeah. No.
So they're like, you know
So
what?
You didn't like Halloween 5, where all the kids like got Michael Myers masks and like got possessed and.
Oh no, you're talking about Halloween 2, right?
No, I think it was Halloween 5, or like there was one.
Was that? Which
Well,
one
it was one of the ones,
there was
like,
one
in the
called-
middle.
There was one called Season of the Witch, or Halloween 3. There was one.
I think
called,
it might have been 3. Yeah,
That's where they get like pumpkin masks.
yeah, the
and-
pumpkin masks.
Okay,
that's what
now
it
I've
was.
had. That's an interesting one because I've had.
'Cause it was terrible.
I think it's fucking horrible. I think
Is
it's
that was the one that
epic.
had Paul Rudd on it,
I think
right?
that was Halloween. That was the one that came out in the 90s. That
It was,
one did
yeah,
have
that was
Paul
an old
Rudd.
one. He was
No,
like the weirdo in the.
Yeah. That was the 90s one. I remember that. But
Yeah.
no, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, in my opinion, is an epic piece of shit. And people will try and go back and defend it and talk about how it's like there's this whole thing on the internet now where they're talking about how it's an undiscovered masterpiece. And
No.
what are you guys talking
Who the
about?
fuck is saying
This
that?
garbage.
An
This is
undiscovered masterpiece.
no, yeah. Go if you. That movie fucking sucks. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah, don't watch it.
Yeah,
Or do watch
don't
it.
even. Yeah,
watch
do watch
it, but know what you're going
and tell me
into.
how shitty it is.
Yeah. Message us directly, both of us.
Yes, please do.
And tell us your thoughts on that movie.
So-
I'm probably going to watch it later today just because we brought it up.
Yeah,
Like,
you know what? That's actually, let's make it a point for our next podcast. We're gonna watch Season of the
writing
Witch.
this down. We're watching Halloween Season of the Witch.
We're gonna pick it apart. I have a feeling that whoever directed Season of the Witch also directed Never Back Down too.
There's a good, there's a really realistic chance of that.
So yeah, this new Halloween, it's taking place 40 years to the date after the original, and it's gonna have Jamie Lee Curtis in it.
Really?
It's gonna have, get this, they're getting the guy who played the original Michael Myers. He's playing him again.
Fuck yeah.
So they're bringing back the OGs. You know, they're doing it up. Now, what I would love, I don't know if they're doing it or not. What I would love, John Carpenter is still alive. I would
He was
love,
like a consulting director or something like that.
or if they had him do the score, because that's the most underappreciated. Now, not
John Carpenter always did the score.
he
for
did
his
the
music,
score.
for
John
his movies.
Carpenter
I forgot about
created
that.
the keyboard, the whole thing for. And what people don't realize is that the key. So,
Do you realize what a like? I'm not trying to keep using this word, but what a visceral aspect that is to
Absolutely.
to movies where
So-
you're watching and experiencing, but when the director, the person who is at the helm of how you're going to experience this movie, it's their vision that they're portraying to you, is controlling what you're hearing as
Yes,
well.
yes.
What an impact that makes.
yeah, no, absolutely. And what John Carpenter did for that movie is that. So this is an interesting fact, and if you guys haven't seen, there's a very, I think it's on YouTube. There's a really interesting documentary on Halloween on YouTube, and they talk about this in the documentary is how John Carpenter first screened Halloween with no music. Mm-hmm. So he showed it to a group of people, and they hated it.
Yeah.
They're like, "This movie fucking sucks. What is this crap?"
It's so
John
boring.
Carpenter-
It's just this guy walking around.
Yeah, John Carpenter goes back and creates the score for Halloween, and he, in my opinion, the score for Halloween is the best score of all time.
Mm-hmm.
You're never gonna find a better one. Most people don't even realize how not just movie music, but how much music that John Carpenter influenced. That whole synth sound, that that is the greatest score of all time. I can't think of anything better than the it completely creates a whole new atmosphere in that movie.
It's almost like he was one of the original hip hop loop creators.
In a way, yeah.
It's like kind of is like a hip hop loop.
It is
like,
very much so. Yeah. Yeah, so John Carpenter created that. So that whole movie is like, that's his baby.
Yeah.
And watch that documentary if you guys get
I'm
a
a big
chance.
John Carpenter fan. I think John Carpenter is one of the all-time great directors. I don't really think he gets enough credit.
He doesn't.
He's well known. He's top tier as far as anyone's concerned. But like,
Well, I think people within the film industry, they like to kind of belittle horror as a genre.
Absolutely.
You know, it's constantly getting like you'll never hear. The thing that's strange to me is that in an Oscar race or something like that, they'll only pick for Best Picture. You know, they'll pick like dramas. Like, why can't a horror movie? Why can't these other genres win Best Picture? I don't understand it.
It's almost like, well, in fairness, nobody really. It's really rare nowadays, at least, that an honest effort is made in making a horror movie into a good movie. It doesn't happen that much, but yeah, it's almost as if like a movie has to be. You have to try to enjoy a movie for it to be considered a good movie.
Right.
So you have to sit there and pay attention and be like, all right, well, I can see how this could be. Well, it's not entertaining, but I see the point.
Right. Well, you know what I've always said. This is what whenever I go see a movie with Ariana, she kind of has I have a lot more patience with my movies, and I can sit through a drama. Mm-hmm. That's hard for her sometimes. So we don't always agree on the movies we see. But as far as movies go, as long as it makes me feel something, usually I'll like it. Even if it makes me feel sad, even if it makes me feel, whatever. As long as it doesn't make me feel hatred for how shitty the movie is, then I could probably like it.
Well, there's a difference between like appreciating a movie and actually enjoying it.
But I see what I was going to touch on is I see what you're saying. Like when you have to really search for things to appreciate in a movie, then how much do you really enjoy it? If
Right.
you have to search that hard to find them.
If you have to
know?
make a conscious effort to like the movie,
Right.
you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I get it," because his father.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's.
I was
You're trying.
I was talking about this the other day. We were at a restaurant and they had these paintings up at the restaurant, and to me, they just looked like really shitty paintings because they were just there. I don't know if you would call them abstract or whatever.
Surrealist.
No, they were like they were just like these really simple paintings of like a beach with a boardwalk, but they
Okay.
were purposefully out of perspective. And then to me, it just looked like a 3-year-old painted it. And then Ariana was like, "Well, it's art, it's subjective." And I guess for me,
I
because
feel like that's an excuse for art to just be shitty.
that's what I said, because I was like, I don't know if I look at it different because I grew up doing art and drawing and stuff like that. So to me, I don't necessarily. I do think that art is subjective, but I also think that there should be an underlying amount of skill.
So I wanna talk right now, since we're on this subject, about a little thing that I learned about. Like, I'm not an expert in art, but I've taken a couple art history, art appreciation classes, so I have a little bit of background in this. And there is a subcategory of art that I think should be obliterated from the history of humankind, and that is called Dada art.
Yeah, Dada art.
I think that is the biggest fucking sham.
It is.
The whole it's art because it's art. It's the whole it's art because we say it is. No, a gold urinal with the words Man Ray written on them is
Yeah.
not art. Nobody
Yep.
you didn't put effort into creating that. You didn't put there's no meaning into it. There's nothing that makes that art aside from someone saying that it's art.
Well, Keith, an artist would argue that the fact that it contains no meaning is artistic in
Right.
itself.
And
that's the idea
Yeah.
behind Dadaism.
Yeah, exactly. It's the fact. In fact, specifically, that is the meaning behind Dada art. Dada art is art with no meaning aside from the fact that someone says it's art. And I
Now-
feel like that's a fucking huge cop out. I think that's a fucking
It
cop
is,
out.
and here's the problem with that type of art, is because you have it's really stems from Dadaism started as a kind of a fuck you to the
Yeah,
classical art standards, but those standards are there for a reason. It's because it's a skill that somebody takes time and hours to get good at and to create a good piece of art.
It's like when I hear a musician write lyrics and then I hear some other musician just say words set like over a beat. I go, well, I prefer the one with lyrics. Why? Because those lyrics had rules to how they were formulated, and that gave a structure to why it sounds better to me.
Right, and you can take now, and here's a good example. Like you can take like a Pablo Picasso, who he was known for doing like abstract pieces
Cubism.
of art. Cubism, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at his art closely, within that cubism, there's still some structure.
There's structure. There's purpose.
And-
there's actual. It's when you see those kinds of the art from an expert artist like Pablo Picasso, there are mathematical equations within those
Exactly.
separated
Yes.
cubes, and there's a structure that will blow your mind that unless
It's
you're a
there.
mathematical expert, you
Right.
couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, and there's a
Like,
structure that's there, but you don't even know it's there, and that's what makes it pleasing to the eye. But
Yeah.
and what people don't realize with somebody like Pablo Picasso too is that prior to him doing Cubism, he was like an amazing traditional artist.
he was a naturalist
young
artist.
prodigy.
Yeah.
So he got so good, he became such a master, and he got so bored with being a master early on that he went a different direction. So see, I can appreciate that because there's a prerequisite skill there. There's a subset of skills that preluded that, and that made his abstract stuff that much better. But
So-
then when you have somebody taking a fucking picture of a goddamn toilet seat or a fucking urinal,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, man, that's nothing.
You're gonna have to forgive me here because I always forget which one it is between, like, I always get Monet and Mondrian mixed up. I think it's Mondrian who does I think they're called concentric lines, where he does there'll be a straight line and then there would be these boxes of solid color. It'd be like a yellow box, and next would be like a blue box. It's a different size.
Yeah, I think that is Mondrian, because Monet was like the I think he was like an impressionist or something.
Yeah, so Mondrian, and I always hated that style because I thought like, okay, so it's a fucking straight line and a block of color, fascinating. But his early work, he used to draw these. When he mastered naturalism as his first style, where he would draw something and it would look like a photograph of it. He would draw, or paint. Excuse me. He would paint these fucking gorgeous like flowers. It would be like a picture of like a rose, and it would look like real, but it would be like the most beautiful rose you've ever seen. It was like I remember seeing that and just being like, okay, so I can respect what this guy's doing because he's using skills that he mastered.
Right.
He can do that stuff that I see and is pleasing to me, and then he moved on to something else because he could draw your face like a picture,
right?
And that would be no problem,
right?
So,
well, and the thing about the world of fine art is just bullshit. It's total bullshit because
that's what subjective means.
Exactly.
If someone says it's subjective, that just means it's bullshit.
And it's very much a status thing, just like the world of to me, like the world of fine art is bullshit. It's almost like the same thing. Now, I don't think that the world of fine wine or something like that is necessarily bullshit. I think there is such a thing as good tasting wines, right? But it's not so much the wine itself as it is the culture. You know what I mean?
The name of the vineyard.
Right. And it's all that bullshit. And it's almost like if a group of people decides that it's good, then it's good. And it's kind of the same thing with fine art. I mean, you could get a really famous artist who just decides to take a canvas and just paint it blue. And if it's done by this specific artist, then these fine art fucking snobs are going to decide, they're going to talk themselves into thinking it's good. Depending on what the price is. So if this guy sets the price at, here's my famous blue painting for $1 million, they're going to be like, oh, you see what he did here.
You see the depth,
the tone of blue.
When you look into it,
it pulls you in differently than other tones of blue. They'll talk themselves into it, and they just, to me, that's idiotic. A really good movie you guys should see if you haven't seen it that kind of exposes that world. I haven't seen that.
Okay. Or no, is it The Circle, or am I talking about The Square or something?
I think I know what you're talking about.
I haven't seen that one yet, but I saw the trailer for it, and that's basically what it is.
No, there's another one that kind of it's called Exit Through the Gift Shop, and it's about this guy who his name is God, what the fuck is? Well, everybody knows who Banksy is. He's like the famous graffiti artist, and there's this guy named Terry who he hires, who kind of follows them around while they're doing their graffiti work. And Terry is doing all this filming while he's following them around. And Terry is claiming that he's going to create a documentary for him. Well, halfway through, they realize that Terry doesn't even know how to edit a documentary. He doesn't even know what he's doing. They essentially think maybe he's just a fucking crazy guy who wants to hang around with us and film us. So they discover this halfway through the so-called documentary. And they discover that Terry films everything. He doesn't film just his time with them. He films all of his family time at home. He's just a serial filmer.
A serial filmer.
So then Terry decides that he wants to become an artist like Banksy. So Terry creates this whole persona called Mr. Brainwash. And he starts guerrilla marketing and promoting this whole event that he's going to put on in Los Angeles. Where Mr. Brainwash is going to premiere all of his artwork. So Terry hires a team of people to create all these giant pieces of art installations for him. And it's this whole big fucking production. He gets all this buzz around it. And before you know it, these pieces are selling and the fine art world is buzzing, and it's all about this Mr. Brainwash character.
Okay.
And it's super interesting because it shows you how easy it is to kind of infiltrate that culture, and about how this guy has no skill in art,
how it's
can just create through hype. It's just hype. That's what it is. It's
literally positions himself to the top shelf of this game just by buying out space and self-promotion,
right,
with no actual skill, no development. He just decided one day that that's what he's going to do. What was this called again?
Exit Through the Gift Shop.
Exit Through the Gift Shop. I'll have to look into that. Sounds interesting.
It's really interesting. They have he gets hooked up with through the course of the documentary. It kind of gives you a little bit of history on Richard Ferry, the guy who started Obey in the '90s, and it gives you this whole kind of background of street art as well.
I'm very like I like art culture and art history. I got no real art skills as like with my own hands, but I like to learn about it. I think it's very interesting. I like to learn about artists who a lot of the time they have really interesting stories. I did a whole report on Van Gogh one time. That was really fun. Van Gogh basically just had a horrible life. Everything about his entire existence was just miserable.
Yeah, he's the most interesting of
the whole thing about him cutting his ear off, that was like way over exaggerated, and means like he cut like a piece of his ear off. I think it was even an accident, and he just like it was a while ago, and I learned
wasn't
about this.
Wasn't there a thing with Van Gogh where they said that like if you using numbers or something like that, you could like maybe recreate some of his paintings or some shit like that? I thought I had heard.
Yeah, there's some kind of mathematical system to it. Like I don't know, but like the most that I studied about Van Gogh was more about like what happened in his life.
Yeah,
like he traveled around. He never had a penny in his entire life. He was never appreciated until after he died. He was sick most of the time. He was like in love with this one girl who, she was kind of a bitch. she led him on and stuff, and like she kind of like stayed tight with him, but like she would answer his letters, but then she would never bang him. And that was the girl he like sent his ear to.
He should have sent her his dong.
Remember they did that on Family Guy? It was like, he's like, here, I got you this, and she opens it up as his ear, and she's like, oh my god, like, well, what are we gonna do about our kids? Like, oh, you wanted kids. Well, I probably shouldn't have gotten you this then. He hands her like a long box. You probably should have told me that before I got you this.
Family Guy. Do you remember there was an episode of South Park where they go, Simpsons did it, Simpsons did it? That's what Family Guy. So there's this episode of South Park they had years ago where the whole premise of the episode is about how you can't do anything the Simpsons haven't done already.
Yeah.
And that's like Family Guy at this point. Like that just proves that like, you know, like these long-running cartoons that have to cycle through all this material every week. Yeah. Like they just do everything.
They eventually go through everything. The thing about South Park is like they had the system down best because they would be responding to what's currently going on.
Yeah,
so they didn't really go back that much.
No, South Park is very unique in that regard. A lot of people don't know that South Park, it was written the week of, on a weekly basis.
It was usually written like the day of, like it was 24
sometimes
hours.
Sometimes they have a
the documentary like
what was it called?
Some about 24 hours, yeah,
something.
like.
But yeah, they a lot of times they would be finishing up an episode the day that it aired.
Yeah.
South Park is pretty impressive in that regard.
Well, Matt Stone and Trey Parker are actual. They are content providing geniuses. They're truly gifted at creating content. All their movies, I've never seen Book of Mormon, but I'm told that it's like it's an actually exceptional piece of theater, not just for how funny it is, but just like.
That's what Wyatt went to go see it live, and he said that it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like laugh out. Like I know a couple of other people that saw it actually, and they said it's hilarious.
Right.
It's supposed to be really, really good. And Matt Stone and Trey Parker are just geniuses. I mean, I'm pretty much a fan of everything they've done.
I've never seen something that they created that I wasn't.
That's what I was gonna say. Like I loved like Basketball.
Basketball was great.
I love that. To me, that's one of the most underrated comedies. Like there's a scene, my favorite scene in Basketball. There's a scene where the evil billionaire team owner of the rival team is taking them through, and he's showing them all of his famous sports memorabilia. And he shows them like Ty Cobb's baseball bat and like, you know, famous baseball that was caught. And then you see in the background in a glass case Kareem Abdul-Jabbar just sitting there.
Yeah.
Like towards the end of the scene, he opens the glass case and he clocks out. He has like a punching card. I just thought that was like the most clever thing.
Just pays Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on a time card basis.
So when we were just talking about how Simpsons did it and about shows, just some of these cartoons cycling through so many ideas, and I just pulled up Simpsons are on this long running hot streak now for predicting the future, and I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this.
I didn't hear about this. I just saw
I just pulled up a list, but they have all this weird shit that the Simpsons have like eerily predicted, and I had heard of a lot of them before, like Donald Trump becoming president, 9/11.
That's hilarious.
But I have a list of a few of them right here, and
I see the tobacco plant up on top.
Yeah, it's a tomato. One of them is a radiation spawn mutant tomatoes. Deformed vegetables, fruit reportedly pop up around Japan. So that's one of them. But there's a bunch of different ones. And in 2008, Homer's voting machine changed his vote. Let's see. There's some other interesting ones here. In 1995, Lisa's future fiance could verbally communicate with his watch. That's kind of a common one, though. That's like a Star Trek.
That could be completely obvious that was going to happen eventually. I kind of felt like, as computers become smaller and microtechnologies sort of start to dominate the market, that's an obvious trend that we're eventually going to have.
Yeah, in 1994, horse meat was a secret ingredient. Remember that big old horse meat thing? Yeah. Which I don't know, why exactly, if you're going to eat cows, why is, a horse any different, really?
I feel like, first of all, I think horse meat is probably better for you.
It's got to be, that's got to be a lean
it's
cut,
leaner. Right? I would imagine to be a lot more expensive, too.
Yeah. In 1994, an Apple product wasn't always sure what its owner was trying to say. That's a pretty interesting one.
That's
I think,
Siri
actually.
for sure.
Yeah. In 1991, Ringo took decades to respond to his fans. I don't understand that one.
Yeah, I don't get that. Yard work simulator,
What?
Farmville.
Okay,
I forgot about that. That's hilarious.
This is the funniest one so far, I think.
Yeah.
So, in 1998, Springfield kids were stoked about a yard work simulator.
I remember the episode when they're at the virtual reality thing, and they put the kids in the yard work simulator.
They've got these two kids on The Simpsons with VR headsets on, and they're playing with this simulator of them doing yard work, and then you have Farmville 10 years later. Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. In 1995, Lisa's future college librarian was a robot, and then they have this article here from 2011. Robots retrieve books in University of Chicago's new futuristic library.
Robot librarians.
It's pretty fascinating. You could definitely see that come. Let's see, 1995, Rolling Stones poster. Let's see. Anyways, you guys get the point. I don't want to go too long on this, but there's a shitload of Simpsons predictions, and there's some really, really... These ones that we have a list of right now aren't too crazy, but there's some really kind of creepy ones that you can find online, and I would encourage you guys to look into it if you get a chance.
I'd also like to point out that all of these were from the golden age of Simpsons episodes before they really fucking fell off. These were all mid-90s.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't aware, the Simpsons are notorious. There was a certain season that says they supposedly got really bad after.
I want to say there was so there was a long period of time that Conan O'Brien was writing for The Simpsons, and there was there was a whole. I'm not saying it was exclusively Conan O'Brien, but
he was heavily involved though.
Yeah, there was a cast of writers that were working during that time. And I would say it's probably around the 11th, 12th, maybe 13th season that they basically just got an entire new cast of writers.
Right.
And there is a clear drop in the quality of writing. The joke making, the style, the actual the jokes become more how do I put this? Predictable.
Mm-hmm. And I think The Simpsons, when they first came out, they were, and I don't know if it was more or less just a timing thing, but they were generally a little more edgy when they first came out, right? They kind of got more mainstream as they went along.
They got more flaccid. The Simpsons jokes just used to be so clever. The things they would say were just so smart and clever and really just killed me.
So it looks like Conan O'Brien was a writer on The Simpsons from 91 to 93. I know that, I wonder, was George Odenkirk a writer? No. So yeah, they did have some different writers early on. Let's see, Al Jean, yeah, Matt Groening. Yeah, but I have heard that same thing. And I know that there's some really interesting overlap. Like I was talking to my buddy yesterday, and he was telling me he was talking about that show Better Call Saul, and he was talking about I think it's Bob Odenkirk on that show, but the guy who's on Better Call Saul, I guess he worked on they all worked on like Saturday Night Live together, him and Conan and Steve Carell, and it was like before a lot of them really hit it big and got famous.
When a lot of people were like writers. Well, I've been listening to a lot of stand-up comedy lately, and what I'm finding is there's a lot of these comedians who are like actors and stuff now that you never really saw them on Saturday Night Live, but they had a lot of them working as writers. They had tons of people, like a lot of people in the comedy industry worked as writers and stuff on Saturday Night Live, and a lot of them never even had skits that aired. But they just had this huge staff of people because that's a place where a lot of people start their career. So they bring you on to Saturday Night Live and they're like, hey, kill or be killed. You guys got anything for us? And then most of them get fired. And they go on to be either like famous comedians or in the industry. But
yeah, it's fascinating because you have these behind the scenes dudes who are kind of, secretly responsible for a lot of times for like a certain brand of humor that you might enjoy and you might not even realize it,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it says here Bob Odenkirk. Yeah, he worked on I think he was part of Gary and Ace, the ambiguously gay duo on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
he was one of them, and then the other one was Steve Carell.
Ace and Gary.
Ace
my
Gary.
God, that was old school, man.
Yeah. That's another one that really the quality of it has really diminished. I felt like Saturday Night Live now. I try to watch it and it's just like
it's been a long time since I've tried. I would hate to speculate on something that I don't know.
Well, every once in a while they'll release like a skit that's kind of funny, but I felt like they were hilarious to me in the 90s.
Sure.
Like when they had
that
was the golden age for me.
Will Ferrell, Chris Kattan,
Chris Farley, Phil Hartman,
dude,
Adam Sandler. I mean, they had just a rap sheet of really funny guys all there at once. Chris Rock, David Spade. And then Will Ferrell kind of came in later in the 90s.
Will Ferrell was like and he was like one of the last
real funny guys,
real funny people on that show.
I agree. Yeah, and they did have some guys. They had some decently funny people to come out of the 2000s, like Bill Hader. And,
there definitely was. Yeah, there definitely was still funny people going in and out of that show. It just didn't have like the overall like all-star hilariousness that it had. No. Like when we were kids.
Yeah, and Chris Farley was just like a force of nature. Like he was
truly.
Man, that guy was. I don't think I've ever seen a more physically funny comedian.
He was elemental, man. He was just like It was Earth, Wind, Fire, and Chris Farley.
Yes.
Breaking down walls of laughter.
Like Matt Foley, the motivational speaker, is like that. That's easily one of the best ever. My personal favorite SNL skit of all time is probably. Do you remember the Schmitz gay one, the beer?
Yeah.
Him and Adam Sandler.
They're all like,
into
whoa!
The pool party.
And there's all the guys.
There's all the guys in bikinis. And oh man, that is like I just love that. That's the funniest one. And then Will Ferrell
making fun of the the overtly fucking like sexual and masculine fucking beer commercials.
Yes. And they there was funny. It was funny. I heard a
have you heard James Adomian before?
No.
All right, he's super funny impressionist stand-up comedian who also happens to be gay, and he has this thing about straight beer ads as one of his tracks on his special. And it's like he starts out, he's like, I got this thing about watching these beer ads. It just they come at you so aggressively, like, watch out, America, you might be too gay for our beer. Like, yeah, it's totally that, just like flipped over the Schmitz gay.
Yeah, do you remember what was I gonna say? I just totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry,
what was
man.
it? No. I think I was thinking of a Will Ferrell. Oh no, okay. So there was a story I heard on it was somebody who was on I think it was Jim Brewer. He came on Howard Stern one time, and I think he was talking about, if it wasn't Jim Brewer, it was somebody else who was on SNL. I don't remember, but they were talking about how Will Ferrell, if he was going to play a certain character on SNL that day, he wouldn't break character no matter what. So he would even be that character backstage. So they were talking about how one time, I think it was Jim Brewer saying that him and Tracy Morgan one time were trying to get Will Ferrell to break character, and he just would not break character no matter what. So then they said they just started beating the shit out of Will Ferrell, and they body shot him. Said they weren't punching him in the face, but they were body shotting him, just beating the shit out of him.
Break character.
Yeah, he would not break character. Even he was like physically being beaten up, he just would not do it. Because they said it was to the point where it was like actually very annoying. Because you would try and talk to Will Ferrell, and he would not break character.
Right. It's like what people would say about Daniel Day-Lewis on on the set, where it'd be like, "What's up, Daniel?" And he was like, "Valen."
He would only answer as like, yeah. They said that when he did like Dances with Wolves, like he fucking Last of the Mohicans. When he did was it that Last of the Mohicans? Was that the Indian one he did?
Yeah,
the
was
Mohicans.
No. The Last of the Mohicans was, that was about him in Ireland. Like, no, that was clearly the one about the Native Americans.
That was the one where So he, they said that during the filming of that, he like lived in a teepee and he built his own teepee and all this crazy shit.
Well, on the movie The Boxer, he trained in boxing so rigorously that his boxing coach said that
he could contend with
a professional boxer in a real match.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, boxing had very little to do with that actual movie. It just happened to be a boxer.
Right.
But, it's cool that he had that kind of commitment to the role.
Yeah, I do. Even though I think it's definitely crazy, I do admire that type of commitment. It's and it definitely shows through. I mean, I don't think Daniel Day-Lewis, has he ever been in what would be considered a bad movie?
No,
I mean, the guy's
Daniel
got
Day-Lewis
immaculate track. Now, this brings up a good point. I did see a movie recently that he was in that I fucking hated.
Was it My Left Foot?
No. It was called Phantom Thread.
Okay.
And we went and saw it. It got a really good Rotten Tomatoes score.
Okay.
So me, Ariana, and a couple of our friends.
That just doesn't mean what it used to, does it? Has Rotten Tomatoes gone soft? Because
No.
I've been seeing some 100s
Here's what I'll say. Is I don't always strongly agree with their highly rated movies. Like if they give a movie 100, I might not give it 100. But I do think that their meter for shitty movies is pretty good. Like generally, if a movie gets below like a 40%, it's probably going to be pretty shitty. But it's not as accurate as it used to be. I definitely agree with that. Anyways, this movie was called Phantom Thread. It was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, the guy we were talking about earlier, who did Magnolia and Boogie Nights and all that stuff. I fucking hated this movie.
It's that Paul Thomas Anderson style is it's kind of hit or miss.
Yeah,
because it's very like you. I think you even used this word earlier. It's abrasive.
Yes,
it's rough. And that sometimes works, but when it doesn't work, it's like stabbing you in the fucking eyes. When you're watching a movie that you don't like, that's that style. Yeah. It's like, ugh.
And look, don't get me wrong. There were elements of this movie that I enjoyed. There were like the set design and the actual production and stuff like that. It was a very beautiful movie. You felt like you were in the time period that the movie took place in. It was just so like I fell asleep. I'm gonna be honest. I fucking fell asleep. I don't remember the last time I do remember actually. The last time I fell asleep in a movie was when I saw Superman Returns in like 2007
with Brandon Routh.
Yeah, and I hated that movie.
The worst superhero movie ever made. Yeah. One of the worst movies ever made. Yeah,
terrible. I fell asleep through that movie. So I fell asleep through this movie as well. And it was just, and I woke up and it just sucked. I mean, it wasn't, I don't even know what to say about it.
That could be one, that could be another one that we can get into picking apart on another time. We would have to rewatch it. I could give you this about Superman Returns. Brandon Routh is not good looking enough for them to have filmed it the way that they did. It was basically a series of dramatic slow motion falling scenes where they were doing model angles on Brandon Routh's face, and that was it. That was all that movie was
they had
for
Kevin
hours.
Spacey as a weird Lex Luthor, and
Which I always thought was interesting because as a young man, I thought Gene Hackman and Kevin Spacey looked a lot alike. Now, they may not, but when I was younger, I thought they did. There was something about those two people that I got them confused with each other. And Gene Hackman was the Lex Luthor in the old one, like in the 70s one.
Here's the mistake they made. They did something really, really weird with Superman Returns as well, in that the director, Bryan Singer, had such a hard-on for the original Superman, Christopher Reeve ones, that he made this kind of like a sequel to those.
He did. He didn't
Which
do
did
it like...
not work. How in the fuck?
Well, that was what tripped me out, is like, Superman Returns from what? This is a reboot.
Yeah,
it's not a sequel.
And then they made it like a sequel, and it was like, what are you guys doing here? Like, it was a sequel, but it wasn't. It was weird because he like comes back, and you're like, well, what did he return from? They're not really telling you.
Yeah.
And then like Superman ends up having a kid at the end, and the kid has
little
powers.
Kid with
and it's like, that movie was a fucking mess. And thank God they redeemed themselves, because did Batman Begins, that came out before that, right?
Batman Begins,
Or was that after?
It was...
I think it was before.
somewhere near around that time. It might have been before, but it was close.
Yeah, because I think Batman Begins came out in like 05 or 06, and then I think that came out in 07. So it was... But thank God, though. So that movie fucking sucked. And then a couple years later, they released The Dark Knight. And it was like, okay, now DC's back on the map here. And The Dark Knight is, arguably still the best comic book movie ever.
And in my opinion, I thought Man of Steel was fucking awesome. I thought it was really good.
No, you know what? I agree. I didn't love it, but it was infinitely better than Superman Returns.
I'm not even going to compare those two movies. Yeah. They don't have any place at the same
No.
table. But they
now, Man of Steel wasn't like one of my favorites ever, but I did but I did enjoy it. But you know what though? Here's my problem with Man of Steel, and it's the same. We talked about this on the last podcast as well. It's the same problem I have with a lot of DC's movies, is that is this new line of movies that they've done. There's just gaping plot holes that take me out of the movie. And for me, during Superman Returns, while there was elements of Man of Steel that I really enjoyed, so I really liked the tactile feel of like all the technology on Krypton. I thought that was really cool. I actually didn't mind the fact that they had him kill Zod at the end. I thought, because a lot of people were like, well, Superman would never kill him and this and that. It's like, fuck, it's a movie Superman. It's not 1940s Superman. Who gives a shit? If he has to kill the guy to save millions of people, then whatever.
They were adding a level of drama to it because, like, Superman doesn't kill, but he has to kill or more people die. That's that's the wall that he's
and they did a good job. Superman was clearly very conflicted about it. He's like
screaming and crying
in anger
while
when
he
he had
does
to
it.
kill him. So, but the plot hole that really drove me insane was where he doesn't save his fucking dad.
Right.
Superman is faster than a speeding bullet.
None of those people would have seen him do it. It could have been.
And you're telling me that he can't save his dad from a goddamn tornado?
I
that
agree.
Right there, like, I was like, what the fuck? That was the equivalent to the scene we talked about last time in Justice League, where they dig up zombie Superman.
Right, yeah. That was. But I will say this about that. Well, the way they kind of made sense about that. Superman's fast and speeding bullet, whatever. But it shows him later discovering his powers. It shows him later building up his powers. Like, he wasn't really like the.
So he didn't know at the time that he was.
He probably didn't know how fast he was. He couldn't fly. He couldn't do it. He would have been like, still probably could have done it.
That's what I was going to say. Now, now if that's the way they explained it, okay, good. But that wasn't the right way to have his dad go out. Because it made Superman, it really made his character just look chicken shit. Like, it made him look ballless.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I get that.
Not that I need to have, I don't need Superman to have Batman's balls. You got to give him some choice nugs down there. Give him
just
something.
like something.
Save his goddamn dad, man.
Something to make him more than just his powers. Like that's the whole point of superheroes is like they got these powers that give them an advantage. But if it's just the powers that give them an advantage, they're not really that interesting.
Yes,
they got to have some fucking balls.
Yeah, and for Superman, okay. Now, I was never a huge Superman fan growing up. But when I did start to delve into Superman a little bit within the comics, the things that fascinated me about Superman were always kind of the mythology of Superman when they would start to explore like the Kryptonian race.
Yeah.
And
Have you seen the show Krypton yet?
No, I haven't.
It's pretty good.
Is it?
I like it.
I saw previews for it.
It's
but I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I don't think it follows any kind of.
I did watch Smallville. I was like obsessed with.
I never got into Smallville. I never watched
Smallville.
it.
I love. Well, it was kind of like a teen. It started off as like a villain of the week teen drama, but as you got later into the series, they started to introduce like members of the Justice League, and they started to. So I really enjoyed Smallville. And actually, Smallville has the best Lex Luthor. Smallville's version of Lex Luthor, they had Michael Rosenbaum play him.
I think I remember him.
He's a fucking awesome Lex Luthor. And then they have the guy they had play his dad, Lilo Luthor, is like if there's one thing Smallville got right, it was casting. Because the guy they had even play Tom Welling, the guy they had play Clark Kent, he was probably my favorite Superman too. He was a really good Superman.
Yeah.
And,
I remember he had that Superman look. I never watched the show, so I just remember seeing the characters.
The show got a little outlandish with some of the plots and storylines and some of the writing later on, but the casting was on point.
That was still old school CW, wasn't it? Like
you actually when it first started, because it started in like 2001, so it was on WB when it first started.
But that was old school.
And then
CW.
they converted
before
over
it became
to,
CW.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Right.
I tell you, I drove a lady the other day who was she worked for the CW.
No way,
so
really?
She was asking me all my questions about. I was like, well, I'm like a huge superhero fan. She was like, well, tell me all about it. What do you think about our shows? I was like, I watch every single one of them, but I think they're god fucking awful.
Yeah, they really the quality is not.
She was like, really? What do you think about Black Lightning, our new one? I was like, oh, it's great. It's terrible. But I still watch it.
Okay, that's another weird thing. Let's touch on that because Black Lightning has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
What?
And I see Black Lightning. I just see the I just see the dude's costume. I'm like, this is dog shit.
It's awful. Yeah, his costume sucks. The acting sucks. They are doing this really weird thing about like making everyone who is on the show a superhero. Which they've been doing that on all the shows.
Yeah,
That's, like really weird. Like
everybody eventually gets powers, and
it's very strange how they do that.
I'm not a fan of that. I don't like when they do that.
No, because it takes away the exclusivity of the fucking hero.
Well, it's kind of like, did you watch Iron Man 3?
Yeah.
At the end of Iron Man 3, when Pepper Potts gets powers, I thought that ruined that. I thought that was so corny.
I liked Iron Man 3 because I liked how it was a shift in gears. It was more psychological. It was less about fighting villains and superpowers.
Right.
It was more about Tony Stark finding himself and being like, I'm a hero because I'm a genius.
Yeah,
I'm a hero because I have all this going for me, not just because I have a fucking metal suit.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm a fucking problem solver, and I'm a master engineer. And then when it flips around and Pepper Potts is fucking saving the day with their superpowers,
they fucked it up. Yeah, they ruined
and
it.
that just like really took me out of it.
Yeah, I don't know about. Yeah, they fucked it up at the end.
But yeah, Black Lightning's got 100 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's got 100. I don't get it, man. Like, I just don't get it.
It's definitely this may be a controversial way to look at this, but it's definitely riding the wave of the whole Black Lives Matter movement. It's very, very. Have you watched any episodes of it?
I've seen like clips. I haven't
Basically,
watched it.
every single episode is just a.
That does make one wonder, because we all know how Hollywood is. And that does make one wonder if part of the praise comes from not wanting to criticize.
Appear bigoted. Yeah, you don't want to criticize something like that. It's basically it's DC's Luke Cage for sure.
Right. But see, Luke Cage, I liked though. That had some style to it. That was like
Luke Cage had some style.
It was kind of like a superhero version of like The Wire, or like, you know what I mean? It had some, I don't know, it just had some.
I feel like Luke Cage was a little heavy on the racial thing too for a while. I didn't get that into Luke Cage, so I missed a lot of episodes of it. But
Well, I don't mind when they touch on the racial stuff because it would be like disingenuous to say that that's not an element of
no,
it.
for sure.
But
I agree.
I don't like when they make it like, because it takes you out of it when they make it a focal point. You know,
Right.
when they really focus on it so much.
That's what I mean. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I felt like when I watched Luke Cage at first, I only watched a few episodes, my first attempt at watching it, and I remember that being like a heavy focal point for the few episodes I watched.
Yeah.
To the point where it was like, all right, that's great that you feel this way. I just I'm not drawn into it.
Yeah.
And same with Black Lightning. I think we're almost done with the season of Black Lightning, and I've watched just about every episode, and it's the same thing. It's like every single episode is about black people being persecuted on the streets, and it's like, and I get it that matters, but it's also like we're watching a superhero show. We're not
Right, you want it to be
like,
a superhero.
yeah.
And you know, hey, if you guys, if anybody out there disagrees with these points and you want to comment on the video and say, you know, if you happen to be, you know, African American and you think that we're kind of off base here and we're just a couple white dudes who don't get it, please comment and let us know.
Yeah,
I would
seriously.
like to hear it from. We would like to hear it from your perspective.
Because
But
Matt
see,
makes a really good point. Is we are a couple white dudes. This is not our most appropriate place to comment on. But these are the viewpoints from our perspective.
Yeah.
So
I just would like to say it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that it's just like Black Lives Matter or whatever. I don't like anything being beaten into my head repeatedly.
True.
So it could be anything.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's not really the point. It's more just the point, okay, yeah, I get it, but let's focus on like the superheroes now.
I'm trying to watch this show because I like superhero shit. I don't need a moral lesson on
right,
anything.
and there's examples of doing that right. Like take like the X-Men cartoon from the 90s. Mm-hmm. Like the whole underlying thing of the X-Men in a lot of Marvel comics has always been, you know, they're taking characters that are just like in the world of the X-Men, the mutants are kind of persecuted and they're kind of bigoted against.
It's actually it's an example of racial prejudice.
Right, yeah, they did that on purpose. Like they've done interviews with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and some of those guys who worked on those comics. And they talk about how they wanted to make it a point to do that, and they did it on purpose, but they did it in a way where, like we said, they didn't beat you over the head with it, and it wasn't all about that. It was just one aspect of the story.
It was an underlying background,
right?
And it was able to be used more powerfully because it wasn't the subject matter, but it was a constant background factor. It was like, while this is all going on, well, we're fighting villains and we're fighting persecution. We're fighting for rights and struggling to be recognized as equals in society. That just happens to be what's going on. They are these people who are persecuted. And,
right.
You know.
And it's almost like to me, it's almost kind of like a less is more type thing. You know, when you try to hammer a point in too much. Then it almost kind of detracts from the point itself. You know, a little, I don't know, subtlety goes a long way, I would say. Speaking of superheroes, I'm like so fucking excited that Infinity War is coming out in a week. I feel like a little kid. I've been this excited for a movie in I don't know how long. And my wife constantly makes fun of me for it, but yeah, you know, the 16-year-old me would have raging boners all the time over this.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is one of the biggest events in superhero movies. We were actually talking about this before we started recording today, how this is the culmination of what was started when they first started making these modern age Marvel movies. They essentially have been building up to the point where they're getting ready to start the Infinity Wars series. They were getting ready to introduce all the Thanos and all that shit, and then they were going to make this happen. And now we're finally reaching that point. Yeah. Now, do you think that when they finish the Infinity War series, what's it going to be, like a 3-part thing? You think?
No, I think it's 2-part.
2-part. All right.
They have Infinity War 1 and 2. I think they're going to call the second one something different because apparently, from what I've heard, the behind the scenes kind of rumors are that they're supposed to be two very distinctly kind of different movies.
Really?
Yeah, and I think that the second one, I know that there's been rumblings that there's going to be a lot of like time travel involved.
Okay.
So which I think is super, and kind of universe bending stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think they're talking about the idea of introducing like a multiverse, which I think could be super, super interesting.
Here's where I'm at with this. Now, I might have my comic book history off a bit, but what I recall from researching this back in the day, because I never actually read. I know the story a bit, but I never actually read the Infinity Gauntlet series. And was it like a 6-part comic?
Yeah, it was 6 or 7 parts. I actually have every issue of it. 'Cause I first got Infinity Gauntlet when I was like 12. I went and bought it.
So the Infinity Gauntlet series, that's where Thanos comes and basically kills everybody, right?
I don't even remember. Well, yeah, that's the series, Infinity Gauntlet.
So it's Infinity Gauntlet. And then the Infinity War series, from what I remember reading, was when he goes, oh, all right, I fucked up and killed everybody, and now my mistress Death is like not down with that because she doesn't have anybody else to take.
Yeah, I think,
and that's where he goes back and like basically like reverses all the damage he did and brings everybody back. And I thought that was what the Infinity War was, like something to do with that. But I'm not really sure about that.
You know what? I don't even remember. I think I don't know if because they had a few things that they did that were titled Infinity something or another.
Infinity things.
I just know that
like the porn we were talking about coming up with, where we use the Infinity condom to fuck Thanos with. It's got all these gems encrusted around like the base of the cock.
So the original Infinity Gauntlet was Thanos comes down and he wants to, and what I do know is that they're basing Infinity War kind of loosely on Infinity Gauntlet.
Okay. So that's our first little discrepancy there.
I don't remember specifically like the titles that came after it, but I do know that that's what they're basing it on. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting though, because there's apparently what they're saying is that there's a lot of things that are going to change after this. Supposedly we might get some character deaths. A lot of people are speculating that Captain America is gonna bite it. Other people,
his contract's up.
His contract's up. Same thing. They're saying Robert Downey Jr., Thor. The idea is what they're saying is that this is gonna kind of end one era of the Marvel universe and usher in a new one.
That was actually what I was gonna ask you when I was saying when we get done with this series. Do you think they're gonna flip it and start a new thing, or do you think they're just gonna go from that, and then after they're done with Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet series, everybody's gonna fight Galactus or something? Like, where are we gonna go with this?
Ideally, that's what I would like to see happen. In some ways, I definitely want to see a real, true representation of Galactus.
Not like
not that shitty.
Not the Fantastic Four. Rise of the Silver
Surfer. He's a fucking fart cloud.
A fucking gas cloud. No, Galactus was so much more of an interesting character than
that. For those of you guys who don't know who Galactus is, there's this whole kind of cosmic universe of the Marvel aspect of the Marvel universe that was kind of really created by Jack Kirby, who would do these big, crazy kind of techno/cosmic hybrid characters, and Galactus was one of those. And he would do the Celestials and the Silver Surfer, and it was just this really weird kind of psychedelic universe.
But it was fascinating though.
It was
very deep.
It was
like psychedelic's a really good way to describe it, actually.
Thor Ragnarok actually had a lot of that in it. Mm-hmm. It had some of that, it was very Jack Kirby. Galactus, though, I don't know how good the chances are that we will see him because he is owned by Fox right now.
Is he?
Yeah.
That's why they made that shitty movie with Fantastic Four.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem is that a lot of the those Jack Kirby characters, those galactic characters, they fall under the Fantastic Four category. So by default, those characters are owned by Fox. So that's kind of the bummer, really, there, is that a lot of Marvel's best characters are in the hands of other film production companies, and they don't have rights to them.
Just the fact that the characters that have so much potential.
Yeah.
You know, that's all.
Yeah, well, and it's a good thing in a way, because Marvel was forced to take its B-listers and turn them into A-listers, and now, they can hopefully at some point that there's rumors that they might be making a deal to purchase Fox. So if they can acquire those characters and they can have the Silver Surfer come in and Galactus come in, that's opening up a whole nother kind of dimension.
Have you read any of the stuff that's going on in the comic book universe for like Iron Man nowadays?
No.
Like in the more recent stuff?
No.
You know about Superior Iron Man?
I know about that, where he has that crazy suit
So they had this big fight with I can't remember who it was. It might have been Galactus. There's this big thing where like all the Marvel universe was like fighting with Galactus, and then this big fucking paradigm shift happened where like Tony Stark was turned into this kind of like semi-evil guy. Carnage was turned sane. And
so they just
Carnage
wow.
Carnage and Deadpool were both turned into like sane characters.
Oh man, you can't do that.
No, it was a complete paradigm shift. They
wow.
just switched everybody up. They turned a bunch of villains into heroes and heroes into villains, and this is what I thought was really cool. I started reading up on what's going on in Superior Iron Man. Again, anybody who is a bigger Iron Man fan than me, which there are a lot of you because I'm not a huge Iron Man fan, I just thought this was really interesting what was going on. Feel free to comment, correct us, tell us what's going on. But I thought this was super cool where Tony Stark comes back from this whole ordeal, and he took that extremist stuff and he created this like this extremist app and made it like where it costs like $100 a day to have the app on your phone and stuff, and it like. He creates this media frenzy with it where people are like committing crimes and stuff to get enough money to have this app on their phone, because it just basically makes them socially superior to other people, and it gets so bad that like he's instigating violence on the streets with his media propositions, and where people are like assaulting each other for not having the app, and they're like you're like fucking scum if you don't have it, and they're like beating up homeless people in the streets. And so it's this really weird thing where he's become this political villain, but he also is he still saves people. Like he'll fly by a burning building and he'll pull a guy out of it, but then he'll still drop that guy like 100 feet to where he breaks both of his legs. Right. But he saved his life, Right. And you know who is his opposition in this?
Who?
Fucking Matt Murdock, bruh.
Wow. So what did they turn Matt Murdock into?
Matt Murdock's the same. He's still Daredevil, and he's like trying to stop Tony Stark. He's like rolling up in his city, and he's like, "Hey, man. Get real. You're fucking around with people."
So is it through is he trying to stop him through like litigation or something like that?
No, he's trying to stop him the way Daredevil stops people. He's beating them up and stuff. So here's what happens though. This is really cool. Matt Murdock is putting the beat down on Superior Iron Man and gets him stuck. And I don't remember exactly how he accomplishes this. But Tony Stark ends up giving him like an injection of extremis, which cures Matt Murdock's blindness. And but like to keep his blindness at bay, he has to get continuous shots of extremis like daily. So that's what Iron Man is like holding over his head. And there's like a really cool cover art. Of Tony Stark in his Superior Iron Man suit, just like with his feet kicked up over Daredevil's back, like fucking like he's an ottoman or something. It's like it's a trip, dude.
That sounds really, really good. I want to, because I haven't read any of like a lot of the newer superhero stuff in comics.
No, I know.
So I want to check that out.
Yeah, like what got me into that was like I was playing that Marvel game on my phone, and I got Superior Iron Man, and I was just like, I wonder what this is all about.
Right.
So I started looking it up, and I read all about that, and that supposedly from the articles I was reading, it was relatively recent that in the development of the comic world that's going on. But yeah, I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, because I think they debuted that armor like maybe a few years ago or something like that. Yeah, that does sound very interesting. I want to check that out.
As comic book fans, that sounded like a really interesting turn of events for me.
Comic books are just crazy. They really are. It's just like the craziest weird little. If you could, I've seen a lot of like lists online. Like I've seen a couple on Cracked, and they'll have like a list of like top batshit crazy moments in comics, and there's just so many ridiculous issues of comics.
How about when during the Marvel versus DC wars, the amalgam happens and fucking Batman and Wolverine get fused. Like how about that for a trippy thing?
Yeah, that was such a weird character.
Or Sabretooth and the Joker.
Yeah.
And they make the Jackal.
Yeah. Yeah, they had that was a very strange that's kind of odd too, because you couldn't even imagine that happening now, like Marvel and DC coming together. And but I know that during that time period, they were both kind of experiencing, financially a little more dire straits, so they were willing to collab on stuff like that.
Dude, and why not? It was so cool when they did.
I know.
That was a great series.
Well, who would have ever imagined now? Marvel it's like the biggest powerhouse in Hollywood. It's insane.
What a trip, right?
Yeah, because I remember how shitty, like, the best thing, like, they had Blade, which was okay. Blade was good.
Blade was great, man. Blade was great in a shitty way, man.
Yeah, it was.
Blade was exactly my kind of, like, I'm hungover and I don't have anything to do today kind of movie.
Yes. And like, have you ever heard? There's this really funny clip on that they have online where Patton Oswalt, who was in Blade, is talking about all the crazy shit Wesley Snipes would do on set, and you had to address him as Blade. Yeah. And like Ryan Reynolds tells a story about how the first time he met
time he had a wet dream about Wesley Snipes.
The first time he met Wesley Snipes on the set of Blade 3, I think he was in with him. The first time he met him, Wesley Snipes tells him, "Hold your breath; it'll last longer." Like it's like he really thought he was like the Blade character.
Hold your breath; it'll last longer.
So there's a scene that I love from the first Blade where Blade's talking to Deacon Frost at the end of the movie, and he goes, "Some motherfucker's always trying to ice skate uphill." Supposedly, that was actually not even in the script. That was just something Wesley Snipes would say, and they threw it in the movie because it was funny.
I want to point out about Deacon Frost that the best way that he could really incite the anger of Blade, the way that he could really be like, "This'll make you want to fight me, Blade." It's like, "It's me, Steven Dorff, and I've been banging your mom this whole time." If I was Blade, I'd flip out too, man.
Yeah, you know what? And he already had a lot to be angry about. Yeah. I mean, just think of how angry of a guy. Like, really, what were the vampires doing that was so wrong in that movie? They were just partying in a club, having a good time, enjoying their lives, and Blade just goes in there.
Were they even killing people? They were just like...
I think they would just, like, if somebody who wasn't a vampire showed up to their club, they would convert them.
Yeah, like, they were drinking people. They had, like, homies who just came and gave them blood because they wanted to be vampires.
Yeah, and was it a bad thing to be a vampire in that movie? I mean, they seemed like they lived a pretty sweet life. Like
vampires seem to have it going on. Yeah,
had a good time. Blade was just kind of the ultimate party pooper.
Blade was kind of a douchebag if you really think about it. Like
How interesting would it be? Here's a scenario for you. How interesting would it be if in Avengers Infinity War
Blade shows up?
What if they do this multiverse thing and you get cameos from like Blade and Wolverine and like all these other... How weird would that be?
Theoretically, they're supposed to do that, aren't they? Because theoretically, Thanos fights the entire Marvel roster. He takes on everyone who is a Marvel superhero.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, so I mean, that would include Blade. That would include all the X-Men. There's even a scene in the comics where fucking Wolverine's making his move on him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
gets
Now,
fucking vaporized.
speaking of Wolverine, I recently saw something online that I found pretty interesting.
Sure.
Apparently, Hugh Jackman was spotted on the set of Avengers 4 on location in Wolverine garb.
Okay.
So the speculation is he might be making a little cameo in Avengers 4.
Maybe he was just kind of hanging out, and he thought, if I'm gonna be here, I'll be dressed like Wolverine.
That's a possibility.
Like, you know what?
But
I'm gonna have everybody call me Logan, and I'm gonna hang out.
maybe
around
it was
here.
kind of like a Make-A-Wish thing, and they were all really big Wolverine fans, and Hugh Jackman was like, you know what? I'm just gonna show up in
That would be
costume.
cool.
I'm gonna make Robert Downey Jr.'s day.
People
Trying
will
to-
like this.
Trying to find this photo, but I did see it the other day. They had a photo of him on set. So I don't know. That would be pretty cool. I don't know how much I would like that though, because you know what? I was really a big fan of the way they had him go out.
I thought that was perfect. I thought
yeah.
Logan was a really good end to the Hugh Jackman era. We saw that in theaters together. It was
yeah,
and it was a
like,
special moment. It was great.
It was surprisingly emotional.
It
Like,
was.
I never realized how much I loved that character. I mean, he's such a good Wolverine.
Well,
Hugh Jackman is really
he was such a good Wolverine because he created that Wolverine. That
Yeah.
Wolverine didn't exist outside of Hugh Jackman.
No.
There was like the character Wolverine, the comic book character and the cartoon character, the quintessential original Wolverine character is not really like what the Hugh Jackman
Right.
Wolverine is.
Yeah.
But he was dope. He worked. It was we liked it.
He did his own thing.
And watching that character die on screen and essentially like retiring that character, because that's really the only time we've actually seen Wolverine die.
It's a nearly and it's like 17 years that he played that character.
Yeah, that was like a large part of our lives. That was a substantial part of our lives.
Well, when I saw the first X-Men, I was 10 years old.
I will never forget the first time I watched that scene where they go into like that little like biker bar and he's in the
where he's
cage,
having the MMA
like,
fight.
Yeah, or he's having just
Yeah.
like a chicken wire fucking MMA fight,
Yeah.
and it's like that shit was intense. That was
It
crazy.
was. Well, that was the first time really, because before that you had Batman, you know, Tim Burton's Batmans and the Joel Schumacher one and all that bullshit, and then you had the original Superman, the Christopher Reeve one, but X-Men was the first time that they really actually like took the characters kind of seriously. Where they actually tried to make it, you know, now obviously, look, it's a comic book movie, so you can only get so serious, but they actually tried to make them like real characters. And it was the first time where, you know, really what they did with those characters in that movie influenced what they did in the comic too. Because after kind of giving the X-Men the all-black outfits, getting rid of the yellow spandex, they converted over to that in the comics. And as a byproduct of that, they had a lot of really good comics that they produced from that. You know, they had the Ultimate X-Men, they had the new X-Men. It kind of just changed everything. And it changed, it's funny too, because the way that Hugh Jackman portrayed him, it changed how they depicted him in the comics.
Yeah.
He forever changed that character.
He became more of that type of Wolverine.
Yeah, it added a new layer to it. It actually made the Wolverine character a lot more interesting, because prior to that he was a little more one-dimensional. And he was kind of just this ferocious, like, you remember Wolverine on the X-Men cartoon? They had this really weird, and I didn't know this growing up, obviously, but they had this really weird thing where they weren't allowed to actually show Wolverine stabbing anybody because they thought it would be too violent.
Yeah.
So if you go back, and even though he was by far the most popular character, everybody had toys of him. If you go back and watch the X-Men cartoon, it's just Wolverine getting the shit beat out of him constantly. The only time he's able to do any damage, go back and watch it.
It'd be like when he's fighting robots.
When he's fighting
Sentinels.
Sentinels.
Be like Sentinels.
The only time he can actually dice something is a Sentinel. Anytime he gets near a human character, he retracts his claws and then he gets punched or something. And like, So that was a really good show. Don't get me wrong. I love the original X-Men cartoon. That's like one of the best of all time. Yeah. But it's interesting though when you go back and watch it because Wolverine just looks like a buffoon almost when you go back and watch it. You know.
Until he fights some Sentinels.
Until he fights a Sentinel. Until they give him a robot.
Yeah, something non-organic for him to sink those claws into.
Yeah, well, and that was, that's still to this day when Wolverine finally gets to go berserk in the second X-Men and just start, like, chopping up soldiers. And that was, like, the best when you finally really get to see Wolverine go off on screen.
Yeah. It was just great. It was great seeing that on... I like that on the second X-Men movie when those guys break into the school, like Major Striker's guys break into the school and Wolverine just goes off the fucking rails and he's like stabbing people and stuff. And they didn't. It was still like I think that one was still PG-13, so it wasn't. They weren't showing a lot of blood or anything. It was very very mild, but it still had that animal intensity. But when they got to do that as an R-rated thing on Logan. Like he's like cutting people's arms off and like stabbing people in the face, and you see like the blades come out the back of the guy's head. It's all shit. And
it was bittersweet. We both said this when we left Logan that it was bittersweet because you felt like you finally got to see the Wolverine that you've been wanting to see for years, but it was like you only got that one movie with him.
Right.
It was a bummer that you didn't get to see that more. They finally gave it that R rating. I don't know why they're so afraid of that R rating. Like, at least with Deadpool coming out, that kind of opened the floodgates. It opened the doors to allow them to do that.
To be honest, I think that the comic book audience grew up.
Yeah.
I think that it followed the same like age line. I think like we were kind of into that shit when we were kids, and it got popular in our generation. And as we kind of grew up, it grew up with us. And I think probably before us it was less popular. Probably after us it was less popular, and then the media evolved with this generation.
Well, and not only did the comic book audience grow up, but it was also the just like the world. Because, like, I don't think parents are as afraid of taking their kids to an R-rated movie.
Right.
It's different now. Because a kid, he just watch YouTube videos all day where they're cussing constantly and doing whatever. So you can't really... It's pretty much impossible in this day and age for a parent to filter out their kids' content. You can't do it.
Censorship is very, very different. I mean, they could watch fucking Jersey Shore on TV and see people banging and, like, you know...
Yeah.
So sure, it's not going to show their nipples, but like there's two people rolling around under the sheets, like, talking dirty to each other, like
and they can really do now it's just change things. So I don't think that our rating it's not what it used to be. Like I don't think it's as important to people, and that Deadpool kind of proved that because fuck, that movie broke all kinds of records. And dude. It just. Have you seen the trailers for that?
The new one?
Yeah.
It looks great.
It really does. That looks like the truest, most comic booky X-Men movie so far.
Did you ever play the Deadpool video game on PS4?
No, but I remember watching. I'm so lame. I never played it, but I remember watching it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like somebody play through it.
Yeah. Dude, it was really fun. It had like it was a really basic beat 'em up game. It wasn't that complicated. It wasn't very hard. But the overall like story that you follow through, it was so comic booky. It was so like down with the comic book style.
Well, that was fascinating too, because that was kind of like the first. That was before Deadpool had really like appeared in anything. And usually the video game would like he'd been in maybe a few cartoons and stuff, and they had maybe X-Men Origins or.
Well, the first place I saw Deadpool in was it was on like the PS2. It was at like Marvel.
Right,
Marvel, like the aerial view game. I can't remember what it was called. It was like Marvel Champions or Marvel,
right,
Marvel Alliance or something. Like it was mostly X-Men.
Yeah.
But on different levels, they would have different sets of characters you could pick from, and Deadpool was one of them. And I was like, "Oh, that guy looks cool. He's like a red ninja."
Yeah, he had a. That's definitely the character design on Deadpool is really the most winning quality because he's got a really cool design. Like I remember even as a kid when I first. It's funny. The first time I saw him as a kid was It was in a comic book that I had, and I just didn't even know who he was. And I just thought he was cool because you just like had never heard of him. You know,
Yeah.
you didn't. Nobody knew who that character was. Like I remember when I was in high school, when I was like 14 or 15, I had a Deadpool T-shirt, and it was at this time. It's crazy now because there is so much Deadpool product.
Right.
Like you have Deadpool on commercials.
I
and,
literally
like,
have a pair of Deadpool underwear.
yeah. So and at this time when I had this Deadpool T-shirt, there was literally one Deadpool T-shirt you could buy, and it was through this company called Graffiti Designs. That was the only you couldn't
I
find
think
one.
I recall Graffiti Designs. They kind of had like
They had-
stuff like that.
Graffiti Designs was like the hardcore comic book
Yeah.
fans thing. And
That
they
was
had-
that was where you would see things like
yes,
that. Like,
yeah. And they had one Deadpool T-shirt, and then they had one Deadpool action figure that they came out with in the 90s, and then they later came out with one in the early 2000s that I bought actually for like $6 or $7, and then I resold it like a year and a half ago for like $150. So it ended up being worth a lot of money. But yeah, there was just no Deadpool anything, and it's crazy. If you would have told me back then that this would be like the most popular fucking comic book character on the planet, I wouldn't even have thought it was possible.
Well, it was it until it came out and tested the waters and became the big media sensation that it is. We couldn't have really known because Deadpool was so different from what was popular.
Right.
How it would like break the fourth wall, and how it would be really, he was not like a hero. He was a very like wishy-washy, his position was wishy-washy, whether he was like a hitman or a villain or a hero. And I think a lot of people would find that hard to get behind. A lot of people would see that and be like, all right, I don't really know if I care about this character. And then they threw it out there. They made a movie, and people just fucking loved it. So now we know.
Yeah, and it well, he was unique in the sense too that, and they've done a really good job of with the movies is how they make Deadpool so meta, and he's always making reference to, he's always breaking the third wall, and he was like the first. I guess there was other characters to do it, but he does it all the time, and it was just like, it was almost like it's comedy combined with the superhero genre, and it makes for a pretty cool, pretty good character, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for about 2 hours and 40 minutes almost here. You think we want to wrap this up, or you want to push for some more content?
Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap this up. All right.
My voice is starting to go.
I know, me too. I'm feeling like my coffee's drying my throat out. I have a bunch of notes on other things that I wanted to talk about, but we'll
let's
have
save,
to get to that. Yeah.
We're going to be going up to LA for sure, so
Yeah.
let's save some of them for that.
So, this is recording once again in my mother's living room in Santa Maria. So let's reference our audience once again to our social media. You guys can find me at Bone Cutrone on Instagram, or facebook.com/Bone Cutrone for my fighter fan page. Keep up with me, and I will keep up with you. Mr. Lovato, please.
You guys can find me at Brazers. No, I'm just kidding. You can find me at ml_intrinsicresistance.com or ML intrinsicresistance.com is my website. You can find me on Instagram at ml_intrinsic resistance. You can also, that's my fitness page. You can also find me at Matt Reviews Media for any of my movie, graphic novel, documentary, basically just my reviews on anything.
And it has been a pleasure having you as our audience. This was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of cool stuff today. Let us know what you thought about any of that. Anything you guys thought was controversial, upsetting. We like to hear about all that. Anything you guys liked, we like to hear about that too. You feel free to stroke our egos on any platform you like.
And also, if you guys want to, maybe even if you guys want to make requests for topics that you'd like to hear about, or maybe things you'd like us to discuss, that's kind of in line with the what you can tell what our interests are. Please feel free to shoot some requests our way as well.
Which I do want to make a note. We did get some requests in the comments last time, and we didn't get around to following up on. But we promise we'll make a real effort this time.
Yes. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah. Once again, thanks a lot for joining us. This is Back and Bone. We're out.
Bye bye.